Hey, Wide Awake family. If you see this, it's your sign to smash that like button. Yes, you listening right now. That way YouTube shows you more amazing stories like this one. We love you all. Now enjoy the stories.
I knew something was wrong with that place the moment I realized I couldn't remember how long I'd been sitting there. Not in a dramatic way, not like time stopped, just this dull confusion where minutes and hours felt like the same thing. I remember checking my phone and feeling annoyed at myself for checking it again, like I'd already done that recently, except I couldn't remember doing it. The restaurant was one of those spots that looked fake cozy. Warm lights, fake plants, music just loud enough to stop you from hearing other tables clearly. It was attached to a hotel I'd never noticed before, even though it was right off a street I drove all the time. The windows were tall and dark, reflecting more inside than outside, which made it feel like we were boxed in. He was already there when I arrived, sitting straight, hands folded, smiling politely. Normal guy, normal clothes. Nothing that screamed danger. That's probably why I stayed. The date itself wasn't bad. That's the part I keep getting stuck on. We talked about random stuff. Jobs, shows, places we've been. He laughed when he was supposed to. He asked questions back. If someone asked me to describe him later, I'd struggle. There was nothing distinct enough to grab onto. The food was fine. Not great, not terrible. I ate most of it without really thinking. The server came by a few times, always the same one. Tall, quiet, tired eyes. She looked at me a little longer than necessary every time, like she was waiting for me to say something. I thought maybe she recognized me, like I'd been there before and forgot. That happens sometimes. As the night went on, I noticed small things that didn't sit right. The music looped too cleanly. The same song played twice in a row without anyone reacting. The table next to us never changed. Same couple. Same drinks. Same posture. It felt like a pause screen you forget is paused until you notice nobody moves. I told myself I was overthinking. I always do that on dates. Anxiety brain looking for exits. Eventually, the plates were cleared. My drink was empty. His was too. There was that awkward end of date pause where you both wait for the other person to suggest the next step. That's when the server came back. She didn't ask if we wanted dessert. She didn't bring the check right away. She leaned in slightly closer to me than him, like she was sharing a secret she'd shared before. She asked me if I wanted the usual ending or if I wanted to try surviving this time. Not joking, not playful, quiet and serious, like she was offering two sides. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like I missed a step. I stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. My brain reached for explanations. Dark humor. Weird staff banter. Maybe she meant emotionally surviving bad dates. Maybe it was some dumb-themed restaurant thing. But the word this time hit me hard. I asked her what she meant. She glanced at him, then back at me. Her expression didn't change. She said some people preferred familiarity. She said others got tired of repeating the same night. Repeating. I looked at him. He was watching me closely now. Not confused. Not surprised. Waiting. I told the server I didn't understand. She nodded like she expected that. She said most people didn't at first. She said that was usually how it went. I asked what the usual ending was. She didn't answer directly. She said it was quick. She said it was clean. She said people rarely remembered it anyway. My heart started pounding. I felt heat rush to my face, then drain away. My hands were cold. I tucked them under the table so she wouldn't see them shaking. I asked what surviving meant. That made her pause. She said surviving took longer. She said it was messier. She said people who chose it usually didn't come back. Come back where? I realized then that nobody else in the restaurant was paying attention. The couple next to us still hadn't moved. The music hummed softly. The lights didn't flicker. Everything felt frozen in place around this one moment. I asked her how many times I'd been there before. She hesitated and said enough that she stopped counting. That broke something in me. I told her she got the wrong person. I told her I'd never been there. I told her this was my first date with him, my first time in that place. She looked genuinely sorry for me. She said that was what I always said. I turned to him, my heart racing, and asked him what was going on. He finally spoke, calm and gentle. He said he was proud of me for making it this far without panicking. He said last time I didn't even finish my drink. Last time. My chest tightened. I felt dizzy, like the room tilted slightly to the left. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. I asked him what happened to me last time. He didn't answer. He just looked at the server. She sighed softly and said she wasn't supposed to spoil the ending. She said that was part of the choice. I looked back and forth between them, my brain screaming at my body to move, to stand up, to run. But my legs felt heavy, like they didn't fully belong to me. I asked the server if anyone ever chose to survive. She nodded. She said a few did. She said most of them look like me right now, confused, angry, scared. I asked what happened to them. She said they left. She said they remembered enough to stay away. That word stuck. Enough. I asked if she was helping me. She said helping was a strong word. She said she was offering an option. She said nobody ever offered her one. That made my throat tighten. I looked at the exit. It was right there, close enough to reach in seconds if my body would just cooperate. I asked her what would happen if I didn't choose. She said the usual ending would happen anyway. My heart slammed against my ribs. I asked how much time I had. She glanced at the clock behind the bar. She said not much. I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness, but from sheer overload. My head hurt. My thoughts felt scrambled. I tried to remember other dates I'd been on. Other nights. It blurred together in my mind like smeared paint. I realized I couldn't clearly remember how I'd met him online. I couldn't remember the exact message that started it. I couldn't even remember deciding to come here. That scared me more than anything. I took a deep breath and told the server I wanted to survive. She held my gaze for a long second, then nodded once. She said that was new. She slid the check onto the table, but not in front of me, in front of him. She told him it was time. His smile faded for the first time that night. I stood up so fast my chair tipped back and fell over. The sound echoed too loudly in the quiet room. Nobody reacted. I grabbed my bag and stepped away from the table. The server pointed toward a side door I hadn't noticed before, tucked between two plants. She told me not to look back and not to stop until I was outside. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I ran. The side door led to a hallway, then a stairwell, then out into cold night air that felt unreal against my skin. I kept moving until my lungs burned and my legs ached. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I locked the doors and sat there shaking, staring straight ahead. The restaurant looked normal from the outside. Lights on. People inside. Nothing strange. My phone buzzed. A notification from the app. It said I had a new match. His face. Same smile. Same bio. I deleted the app. I turned my phone off. I drove home the long way. Sometimes I still feel like I skipped something important, like I walked out before the story finished. But I'm here. I'm breathing. I remember choosing to run. That has to count for something. I didn't realize how much I cared about memories until she asked me to pick one like it was a menu item. The night had already felt slightly unreal, but that question snapped something loose in my head that never fully went back into place. We met at that quiet restaurant tucked behind a movie theater, the kind of place people only find by accident or recommendation. Low ceilings, soft lights, tables close enough that you could hear other people breathing if you focused. I showed up early because I always do. Waiting feels better than rushing. I sat there scrolling my phone, telling myself this would be normal. Just food. Just conversation. Just another forgettable night. She arrived right on time, smiled. Nothing strange at first. She looked tired in a familiar way, like someone who'd had too many long days stacked together. We sat, ordered, talked. School stuff. Work stuff. Stories that didn't matter much. I remember thinking she felt easy to be around. Not exciting, but calm. That felt like progress to me. The food came. I actually enjoyed it. That detail matters because it made everything else harder to dismiss later. My guard was down. My shoulders weren't tight. I wasn't scanning exits. About halfway through, she asked me what my favorite memory was. Not from childhood. Not a big life thing. Just in general. I laughed and gave some lazy answer about a trip I took once. She nodded, but I could tell that wasn't what she meant. She asked again, more specific this time. She wanted to know which memory I'd want to keep if I could only keep one after tonight. That wording stuck with me. I asked what she meant by after tonight. She didn't answer right away. She just watched me, like she was waiting for me to catch up on my own. There was no smile this time. No teasing. Just patience. I told her I didn't hear the question. She leaned back and said some nights blur together. She said some people forget details faster than they expect. She said it helped to choose something worth holding on to. My stomach tightened. I joked that she sounded like she was talking about a procedure or something. She didn't laugh. She asked again which memory I wanted to keep. I started listing random things, trying to stay light. A song I liked, a dumb moment with friends, a game I used to play as a kid. She stopped me. She said it had to be from tonight. That's when the air shifted. I looked around the restaurant, suddenly aware of how enclosed it felt, how the windows were fogged, how the music hummed just loud enough to cover small sounds. I asked her why tonight mattered so much. She said because nights like this didn't always stick. She said people remember feelings but lose order. She said sometimes they wake up knowing something happened but not what. My heart started beating faster. I asked if she was messing with me. She shook her head. She said she didn't like games. She said this was about consent. She said she thought it was kinder to ask. Consent to what? She didn't answer directly. She asked me to think about the night so far, the way the place smelled, the taste of the food, the sound of the music. She asked what part of it felt solid. I tried to focus like she asked. My brain felt fuzzy, like I was coming down with something. I realized I couldn't remember what song was playing earlier. I couldn't remember exactly what we talked about before the food arrived. Those details felt slippery. That scared me. I told her I wanted to keep the moment I walked in and saw her smile. I figured that was safe, flattering, harmless. She nodded slowly. She said that was a common choice. Common. I asked what happened to the rest of the memories. She said they faded. She said some people held on to more than others. She said it depended on how cooperative they were. I pushed my chair back slightly, my heart pounding. I told her I was feeling off and might head out. She didn't try to stop me. She just reminded me gently that once I left, whatever I didn't choose would probably go. Probably. I asked her if she was saying she could erase memories. She thought about it, then said erase was a strong word. She said rearrange was closer. She said sometimes memories needed to be moved out of the way to make room. For what? She glanced at me and said for next time. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, like I'd stood too fast. The room tilted slightly, then steadied. I told her I was leaving. She nodded. She said it was fine. She said she just needed my answer first. I told her I wasn't playing along with this. She said I already was. That's when I realized something was really wrong. My head felt thick, like thoughts were moving through syrup. I tried to remember how long we'd been there and couldn't. I checked my phone. The timestamp didn't help. It felt meaningless. I asked her how many times we'd done this. She looked at me with something like sympathy. She said enough times that she learned to ask earlier now. She said people got upset when they realized too late. Too late for what? She told me some people never noticed. She said they left thinking it was a normal date. She said they woke up the next day feeling like something was missing but couldn't name it. She said those were the hardest ones. I felt panic crawl up my spine. I tried to remember other dates I'd been on recently. They blurred together in my head. Faces without names. Places without order. I'd always blamed that on being busy. On stress. Now I wasn't so sure. I told her I wanted to keep everything. All of it. She shook her head. She said that wasn't how it worked. She said it had to be one. She said trying to keep everything meant losing more. I asked what she kept. She smiled faintly. She said she remembered all of it. She said that was her role. My hands were shaking now. I told her I was leaving and didn't care what happened to the memories. She sighed softly. She said people always said that when they were scared. She said fear made memories fragile. I backed away from the table and turned toward the door. Each step felt delayed, like my body was slightly out of sync with my intention. I reached the handle and paused, suddenly unsure if I'd already done this before. She called out my name. I froze. She reminded me I hadn't answered. My head hurt. Pressure behind my eyes. I felt like I was about to pass out or wake up, and I didn't know which was worse. I said the first thing that came to mind. I said I wanted to keep the moment I stood up, the moment I chose to leave. She went quiet. I waited, heart racing. Finally, she said that was an interesting choice. She said not many people pick defiance. She said it made things unpredictable. I didn't wait for more. I pulled the door open and stumbled outside into cold air that felt too sharp to be real. I bent over, hands on my knees, breathing hard. I checked my phone again. I had messages from friends I didn't remember sending. Plans I didn't remember making. Gaps everywhere. I walked home without really seeing the street. When I got inside, I sat on my bed and tried to recall the night in order. Pieces were missing. But one thing stayed clear. The feeling of standing up, the decision to leave, the moment my body moved even though my head felt foggy. That memory stayed sharp like it was anchored. The next day, I found her profile still active on the app. Same photos, same name, same calm smile. I blocked it. Some days still feel fuzzy around the edges. Conversations slip. Names disappear. But whenever I feel the drift start, I remember standing up from that table. I don't know what I lost, but I know what I kept. I didn't realize how calm I was until he pointed it out, and that's what messed me up the most. Not the words themselves, but the way he said them, like he was grading homework. Like this was progress. Like I was improving at something I didn't remember signing up for. The night started boring in a way I actually appreciated. I'd been on too many dates that felt like auditions, so when he suggested a quiet place, I agreed without thinking too hard. It was a small family-owned restaurant on a side street, the kind with mismatched chairs and menus taped together at the corners. Warm lighting, soft music, nothing sharp, nothing loud. I got there first and picked a table near the middle. Not by the door, not by the back. Balanced. I remember thinking I was proud of myself for not overthinking it. He showed up on time, smiled, normal face, normal clothes. He even apologized for being a minute late, which felt weirdly reassuring. We sat down and started talking like two people who hadn't already been reduced to profiles and pictures. Movies we half liked, food preferences, dumb childhood stories. I felt myself relax, inch by inch. There was this sense of familiarity that didn't feel creepy at first, more like we'd gone to the same school or shared a class once. Something I couldn't place but didn't question. I told myself it was chemistry. We ordered. Food came fast. The server smiled like she recognized us, but I figured that was just her job. I noticed he kept glancing at my hands, but not in a gross way. More like he was checking if I was shaking. I wasn't. I felt steady, grounded. That's when he leaned in slightly and said I was doing much better this time. I laughed because I thought he meant with dating, like I seemed more relaxed or confident than whoever he'd been with before. I even joked about first date nerves. He didn't laugh back. He tilted his head and looked at me with this calm focus that made my skin prickle. Then he said last time I screamed too early. My brain stalled out completely, like someone yanked the cord. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. I asked what he meant. He didn't apologize. He didn't backtrack. He just clarified slowly, like I was the one having trouble following. He said last time I panicked before things had really started. He said it drew attention. He said it made everything harder. My stomach dropped. I told him he had the wrong person. I told him I'd never met him before. He nodded like he'd expected that response. He said I always said that part. The room felt smaller suddenly. The soft music felt too loud. I became aware of every sound, every fork clink, every laugh from another table. Nobody was paying attention to us. That made it worse. I asked him where we supposedly met. He shrugged. He said different places. He said sometimes it was here, sometimes somewhere else. He said details shifted, but reactions stayed the same. I felt dizzy. My hands finally started to shake, just a little. I tucked them under the table. I told him to stop messing with me. I told him this wasn't funny. He frowned slightly, like I'd misunderstood his tone. He said he wasn't joking. He said he was actually relieved. He said I seemed calmer this time, more cooperative. That word hit hard. I asked him what he wanted from me. He looked surprised by the question. He said he wanted to see how far I could get without breaking. He said he was curious. I stood up abruptly, my chair squeaking loud enough that a couple nearby glanced over. My heart was pounding now, fast and uneven. I told him I was leaving. He stayed seated. He looked up at me like a teacher watching a student walk out of class. He said I could leave if I wanted, but it wouldn't change anything. I asked him what happened last time. He thought for a second. Then he said last time I screamed when he touched my wrist. He said it wasn't even hard. He said I startled myself. My wrist burned like he'd actually touched it. I pulled my arm close to my body without thinking. I told him to stop talking. He sighed like he was disappointed. He said he hoped I wouldn't remember that part yet. He said memory always complicated things. I looked around the restaurant, desperate for something solid. The server was at the counter talking to someone. A family laughed near the window. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I asked why nobody helped me last time. He said because nobody noticed. He said people are bad at noticing the right things. I backed away from the table, my legs shaky. I grabbed my bag and turned toward the door. He called after me, not loud, not angry. He told me I was doing really well. He told me to keep breathing and not rush it. That almost made me collapse. I walked fast, not running, but close. My chest felt tight, like my lungs were working against me. I pushed through the door and into the cold air, gulping it down like I'd been underwater. I didn't stop until I was 2 blocks away. I leaned against a wall, trying to calm down, trying to convince myself it was just a sick joke, a messed up guy saying messed up things. My phone buzzed. A message from him. I didn't open it. I blocked the number instantly. When I got home, I locked the door and checked every room like I was expecting someone to be there. Everything was fine, quiet, safe. I tried to sleep, but my body wouldn't let me. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that phantom burn on my wrist. I kept replaying his words, the certainty in his voice. Last time. Around 3 in the morning, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. A dream I used to have as a kid, always the same. Sitting at a table somewhere I didn't recognize. A man across from me smiling calmly, my chest tight with panic. The moment where I tried to scream and nothing came out. I used to wake up crying. I told myself it was just a dream, just my brain filling gaps. But now I wasn't so sure. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I went back to the restaurant in the afternoon when it was empty and bright. Different staff, different vibe. I asked if anyone remembered a scene the night before. The hostess frowned and said she didn't remember me screaming, but she did remember me leaving abruptly a few weeks ago. She said I looked upset then too. I asked who I was with. She described him perfectly. I left without saying anything else. I don't know how many times I've been calm before. I don't know how many times I screamed too early. All I know is that next time, if there is one, I'm not waiting to find out what happens after.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
I noticed the music before I noticed her, which sounds backwards, but that's how it stuck in my head. It was one of those restaurants that pretends music is just part of the air, like you're not supposed to pay attention to it. Low volume, slow beat, voices stretched thin until they barely sound human. I clocked it because it felt off, like a radio between stations. I remember thinking it was annoying but not worth mentioning. I showed up early and sat at a small table near the wall. The place was narrow, all brick and hanging bulbs, like every other spot that thinks dim lighting equals cozy. I kept checking my phone even though I didn't need to. That nervous habit where you pretend you're busy so you don't look alone. She walked in a few minutes later and waved. Normal wave, normal smile, nothing weird. I relaxed a little, because when someone looks at their photos and doesn't immediately give you a bad feeling, you take that as a win. We ordered drinks and talked about boring stuff. Work schedules, how bad traffic was, how the weather couldn't decide what it wanted. I remember thinking she was easy to talk to. Not exciting, but calm. I liked that. I told myself calm was good. The music kept playing. At first it was just noise, soft hum, stretched vocals. Then I caught a word. I didn't realize it was a word at first. It sounded like a breath pulled through a filter. I leaned back slightly, trying to place it. My brain did that thing where it tries to force meaning onto static. The word sounded like tired. That was weird, but not enough to panic. People sing random stuff. My drink arrived. I took a sip. The glass was cold and grounding. We talked about favorite foods. She laughed at something I said. The laugh sounded real. I noticed the music again because the beat stuttered slightly like a skipped step. Another word floated up through the distortion. Late. My stomach tightened a little. That was the word I'd thought earlier while waiting. I looked at my phone and thought I was running late even though I wasn't. I shook it off. Coincidence. Brains love patterns. I focused on her face, nodded along, tried to stay present. The music faded back into the background for a few minutes. I started to relax again. Then I thought I should have worn a different jacket. I hadn't said it out loud. I'd thought it while tugging at my sleeve, feeling underdressed. The music shifted. The stretched voice slid into something almost recognizable. Not clear, but shaped the same way the thought felt. The rhythm matched the way it echoed in my head. My heart started beating faster. I leaned in toward the table, pretending I couldn't hear well. I tilted my head slightly, listening harder without wanting to. The music repeated the shape of that thought again, warped, dragged out, but there. I swallowed hard. I told myself I was projecting, that my brain was tired and doing tricks. I took another sip, the ice clinking louder than it should have. She asked if I was okay. I nodded too quickly. I focused on my hands, on the table, on the texture of the wood, grounding tricks I'd picked up over the years. The song changed. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe I just noticed more. This time, the voice layered over itself, like multiple tracks slightly out of sync. The words came slower. Wrong place. My chest tightened. That was another thought I'd had earlier, right when I walked in and smelled the kitchen grease and wondered if I should have suggested somewhere else. I felt cold all over. I looked around the restaurant trying to see if anyone else reacted. Nobody did. People ate, laughed, leaned into conversations. The servers moved between tables like everything was normal. I asked her if she could hear the music clearly. She said yeah. She said it was kind of relaxing. That made my stomach drop, because it wasn't relaxing to me at all anymore. I tried to listen without panicking, like maybe if I faced it head on it would stop. The next phrase came through slower, heavier. Say something. My hands started shaking. That was a thought I'd just had, right before asking her about the music. The timing was exact. Too exact. I pushed my chair back slightly, creating space. She noticed and frowned a little, like she was worried she'd done something wrong. I asked where the music was coming from. She gestured vaguely toward the ceiling. Speakers, playlist, nothing unusual. I stood up halfway, then sat back down, pretending I was just stretching. My heart was pounding now, loud enough that I felt like it might sync up with the beat. I thought, this is real. The music responded. The phrase stretched, slowed, twisted, but unmistakable. The same cadence. The same internal echo, like someone had pulled the thought straight out of my head and dragged it through water. I felt dizzy. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to shut it out. When I opened them, the lights felt too bright. The room felt slightly tilted. The music kept going. New thoughts now. Older ones. The kind you don't even realize you think because they sit so deep. Dot messed us up. The voice wavered on the last word, like it was mocking the anxiety underneath it. I grabbed the edge of the table, my fingers digging into the wood. I could feel sweat on my palms. I leaned forward and asked her if she noticed anything weird about the place. She looked around confused. She said it seemed nice. She asked why. I didn't know how to explain without sounding unhinged. I told her I needed air. I stood up again, this time fully my legs shaky. I apologized, blaming it on the noise. The music changed volume the second I stood. Louder. Clearer. It pulled another thought straight from my chest. Leave now. I froze. The voice dragged the words out, layered them, repeated them. The beat slowed to match my heart. I looked up at the speakers, my breath shallow. I felt exposed, like my skull was open and the room could see inside. She stood up too, concern on her face. She asked what was wrong. I couldn't answer. My focus was locked on the sound. Every new thought I had echoed back seconds later, twisted but recognizable. Don't look at her like that. I snapped my eyes away from her immediately, terrified of what the music would do with that one. It played anyway. The phrase stretched, the tone distorted into something almost amused. I backed away from the table, bumping into another chair. Someone laughed nearby, thinking I was just clumsy. I told her I had to go. I didn't wait for a response. As I moved toward the exit, the music followed, not literally moving, but shifting its focus, pulling newer thoughts as they came faster now. They know. They done know. They know. The loop made my head spin. I pushed through the door and stumbled onto the sidewalk. The night air hit me hard, cold, and sharp. The sound cut off instantly. Silence. I leaned against the wall, gasping, my heart racing. Cars passed. Someone laughed across the street. Everything sounded normal again. I waited, listening. Nothing. I pulled my phone out with shaking hands and checked the time. I checked my notes app, my voice memos, anything that could explain it. Nothing. I walked away fast, not looking back. I didn't hear the music again. When I got home, I sat on my bed and tried to slow my breathing. My head hurt. My thoughts felt bruised. Out of curiosity, I opened my phone's audio settings. The music app I never use was open. Paused. The track name wasn't listed. No artist. Just a timestamp that matched when I walked into the restaurant. I closed the app and deleted it. Sometimes when I'm in quiet places now, I get scared of thinking too clearly. Like if I listen too closely, something will start listening back. I didn't even want to go out that night. I remember standing in my room staring at myself in the mirror, thinking I looked tired in a way makeup couldn't fix. But I already said yes, and canceling felt worse than dragging myself out. That's how I ended up at that bar, telling myself it would just be one drink, maybe two, then home. The place was old. Not trendy old, but actually old. Low ceiling, dark wood, brass rail along the bar that was worn smooth from decades of hands. It smelled like citrus cleaner and something musty underneath, like the building itself never really aired up. I liked it at first. It felt solid, like it had been there forever and wasn't going anywhere. He was already seated when I walked in. Not at the bar, but at a small table tucked into the corner where the light barely reached. He stood up when he saw me, smiling politely, like he practiced it. Nothing about him screamed danger. Average height, plain jacket, normal face. The kind of guy you forget in a crowd. We sat, ordered drinks, to the usual surface level talk. School, work, stupid stories that don't mean anything. He listened closely, nodding at the right times. I noticed he didn't really talk about himself unless I asked directly. Even then, his answers were short, vague, like he didn't want to put anything out there that could be wrong. I felt a little weird about it, but not enough to leave. Not yet. Our drinks came from the bartender, an older woman with tired eyes and silver hair pulled back tight. She set my glass down carefully, like it mattered where it landed. When she leaned in to place it, her hand brushed mine. She didn't pull away right away. She looked straight at me, not smiling, not blinking. Then she leaned closer and whispered something that didn't match the casual noise of the bar at all. She told me he'd been waiting for me longer than I'd been alive. The words hit me like cold water. Before I could react, she straightened up and walked away, already calling out another order like nothing happened. I stared down at my drink, my heart suddenly pounding. I replayed what she said over and over, trying to twist it into something that made sense. A joke, a warning about him being older than he looked. Some weird bartender humor. I glanced at him. He was watching me. Not in a creepy, obvious way, just attentive, like he noticed the shift immediately. I forced a smile and took a sip of my drink, mostly to give my hand something to do. It tasted normal. No bitterness. No weird smell. That somehow made it worse. I asked him how often he came here. He said often enough. I asked how long he'd been coming. He paused, just for a beat too long. Then he said a long time. My skin prickled. I laughed it off, made a joke about the place being older than both of us. He smiled, but his eyes didn't change. They stayed fixed on my face like he was studying something subtle. The bartender passed by again. This time she didn't look at me at all. I tried to focus on the conversation, but my mind kept drifting back to her words. Longer than you've been alive. It didn't feel like exaggeration. It felt specific. I'd excused myself to go to the bathroom, needing space to think. My legs felt shaky as I stood. He offered to come with me halfway, then laughed and said never mind. I didn't laugh back. In the bathroom, I leaned against the sink and stared at myself. My face looked pale, My eyes were wide. I tried to calm down, telling myself I was spiraling over nothing. But when I came back out, I noticed something that made my stomach drop all over again. There were photos on the wall near the bar, old ones, black and white. The bar decades ago. The same counter, the same tables, the same corner. And in one of them, sitting in that exact corner, was him. Same face. Same posture. Different clothes, sure, different era, but unmistakably him. I stood there too long staring. My heart pounded so loud I thought someone would notice. Nobody did. I walked back to the table slowly. He smiled at me like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't been sitting there for generations. I asked him if he liked history. He said he appreciated consistency. I asked if he believed people could stay the same forever. He said some things didn't need to change. My throat went dry. I glanced toward the bar. The bartender was watching us now. When our eyes met, she shook her head once. Slow, deliberate. I told him I was feeling tired and might head out soon. His smile tightened, just a little. He nodded and said he understood. He said waiting was something he was good at. That word again. Waiting. I stood up, grabbing my bag. My heart was racing now, adrenaline flooding my system. I told him it was nice meeting him. I took a step back. He stood too. He didn't reach for me. He didn't block me. He just looked at me with something like disappointment. He said he'd see me again. I didn't respond. I walked fast for the door, my hands shaking. The bartender was already there, like she anticipated it. She opened the door for me without a word. As I stepped outside, she leaned in one last time and told me not to come back. She told me some people mistake patience for kindness. The door closed behind me. The night air felt unreal, too sharp, too quiet. I stood on the sidewalk for a full minute just breathing, trying to ground myself in something solid. When I finally walked away, I glanced back through the window. He was still standing at the table, watching the door, not moving. I didn't sleep much that night. The image of that photo kept replaying in my head, his face, unchanged, waiting. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I went back online and searched for the bar. I dug through old archives, old photos, scanned newspaper clippings. That photo was from the 1930s. Same man, same face. No name listed. Just a caption about a regular who never seemed to age. I never went back there. Sometimes when I walk past old buildings, I get this awful feeling like something inside is watching, counting time differently than I do. I didn't think a question about stars could make my hands go numb, but that's how the night went. It started normal enough, which is honestly the worst part. When something begins calm, your brain drops its guard and doesn't see the turn coming until it's already too late. We met at a late-night ramen place tucked under an overpass, the kind with flickering lights and cracked stools that wobbled if you lean wrong. Steam fogged the windows so thick you couldn't see the street, which made the inside feel like its own sealed bubble. I showed up early and picked a seat near the wall, back protected, eyes on the door. Habit I never really explained. She came in exactly on time, shook rain out of her hair, and smiled like she was genuinely happy to see me. Not forced. Not awkward. It relaxed me right away. She looked normal too. Hoodie, jeans, worn sneakers. No weird vibe. Nothing sharp. I remember thinking I might finally get a story that didn't end up in my group chat as a warning. We ordered and talked about random stuff. Classes, jobs, how bad the weather had been lately. She laughed easily and asked questions back, which always feels rare. The bowls came, hot and loud and comforting. I leaned back a little, shoulders dropping. I even forgot to keep checking my phone. About halfway through eating, she wiped her mouth, set her chopsticks down neatly, and looked at me with this thoughtful expression. Not flirty, not serious. More like she was checking a box in her head. She asked me how I thought the date was going so far. Not in a fishing way. Not playful, like she genuinely wanted feedback. I shrugged and said it was good. I said I was having fun. I figured that was the safe answer. People ask stuff like that sometimes now, like dates or performance reviews. She nodded slowly, then reached into her bag. I expected her phone. Maybe a charger. Maybe lip balm. Instead, she pulled out a small notebook. It was old and soft at the edges, like it had been over the lot. The cover was plain, no stickers, no label. She placed it carefully on the table between us, right next to the bowls. Then she asked me to rate the date so far. Stars, 1 to 5. My stomach tightened a little. I laughed awkwardly and asked if she was serious. She was. She said she liked clarity. She said it helped avoid confusion later. I told myself it was a joke. Some people are into structured stuff. Personality quizzes, rankings, whatever. I said 5. I said it quickly, hoping that would end it. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She picked up the notebook and flipped it open. That's when I saw the pages. Names. Dozens of them. First and last names, written neatly in pen. Next to each name was a date, a location, and a star rating. Almost all of them were 4 stars or less. Some had notes next to them, short ones. Things like rude line, left early, didn't listen, bad answer. My heart started beating faster. I stared at the list, my appetite gone. I scanned the pages without meaning to, my brain trying to find something familiar. Some of the locations were places I recognized. Restaurants I'd been to. Bars I'd passed. She tapped the page lightly and said these were the ones that didn't make it. Didn't make it where? I asked what happened to the ones with lower ratings. She looked at me like I should already know. Like the question was obvious. She said they didn't get another date. I nodded, trying to relax. Okay, that's normal. Rejection hurts, but it's part of dating. Then she turned the page. The next section was separated by a faint line. Saying names. Saying dates. Different notes. Longer this time. Things like apologized too late, begged, promised change, didn't learn. My throat went dry. I asked what the second list was. She said it was follow-ups. She said some people didn't accept their score the first time. She said some people argued. I asked what happened to them. She hesitated, just a little. Then she said they stopped showing up. That could mean anything. People ghost. People move. People disappear from apps all the time. But the way she said it made my skin crawl. I asked how many people were in the notebook. She flipped to the back. It was thick. She said she'd been doing this for a while. I asked where she kept the 5-star people. She smiled again, smaller this time. She said there weren't many. She didn't show me that section. I looked back down at the names. Some had little symbols next to them. Check marks. Circles. One had an X so dark the paper almost tore. I asked what those meant. She said those were the ones who learned. Learned what? She said learn to be honest next time. My heart was racing now. I felt hyper-aware of everything. The steam. The clink of dishes. The way the door chimed every time someone came in. I thought about the fact that the windows were fogged and the place was tucked under concrete. I asked what she'd do if someone gave her less than 5 stars. She closed the notebook slowly and rested her hand on it. She said that depended on why. She asked me again what my rating was. I said 5, again, firmer. She tilted her head. She asked why. That's when I realized this wasn't about the number. It was about the explanation. She wanted me to justify it, to perform, to say the right things. I stumbled through an answer, said she was easy to talk to, said I liked the place, said I felt comfortable. She watched my face closely while I talked, like she was grading me in real time. Finally, she nodded and opened the notebook again. She flipped to a blank page and wrote my name at the top. Seeing my name there made my stomach drop. She asked for the star rating one more time. I said 5. She wrote it down. Then she paused, pen hovering, and asked if I was sure. I said yes. She stared at the page for a long moment, then added a small note next to the stars. Good first answer. That terrified me. I asked what happened if someone's rating changed later. She said it usually did. She said pressure reveals truth. I pushed my bowl away and told her I needed to leave. Her expression didn't change much, just a slight tightening around the eyes. She closed the notebook and slid it back into her bag like it was no big deal. She asked if that affected my rating. I stood up, chair scraping loudly. People glanced over. I didn't care. I said I was leaving. She nodded slowly and said that would probably cost me a star. My heart slammed against my ribs. I told her to leave me alone. She smiled, calm as ever, and said she'd see what she could do. I walked fast toward the door, my hands shaking. I didn't look back until I was outside in the rain, gulping in cold air. I walked 3 blocks before stopping. My phone buzzed. A message from her. She said she forgot to ask one thing. She asked if I wanted to know how many people were on the list who tried to walk out. I didn't respond. I blocked the number. I deleted the app that night. A week later, I was scrolling through local news and saw a short article about a missing person report. A guy my age. The name looked familiar. I went back to the ramen place once, just to check. It was closed. Paper on the door. Permanently. I knew it was going to be one of those nights the second my phone buzzed with the address reminder while I was already on the bus. Something about seeing the same info twice always makes my stomach drop, like reality checking itself. I ignored it and kept going, because that's what I do. I tell myself things are normal until they absolutely aren't. We met at a small corner restaurant that used to be a laundromat. You could still see the outline of where machines used to be on the walls. It smelled like oil and garlic and old heat. The windows fogged up fast, which made the inside feel sealed off from the street. I didn't love that, but it was raining, and I didn't want to bail over vibes alone. He was already there, sitting at 2 top near the back. He stood up when he saw me, smiling like he was relieved I showed. I sat down across from him, shaking rain off my jacket, trying to reset my mood. He seemed normal, maybe a little too normal. Calm voice, steady eye contact, easy smile. I remember thinking this might finally be boring in a good way. We ordered drinks and talked about dumb stuff. The rain. How the place used to be something else. How weird it was that so many restaurants used to be laundromats or banks. Nothing personal. Nothing deep. My phone sat face up on the table, screen dark. His phone was next to his plate, face down. The food came fast. Too fast. I joked about it, and he laughed. But his laugh came a half-second late, like he was finishing something in his head first. I didn't dwell on it. I was hungry. Halfway through eating, his phone rang. It wasn't loud. Just a normal ringtone. He frowned and glanced at it like he didn't expect anyone to call. He flipped it over. My name lit up the screen. First and last, spelled right. I froze. I looked down at my own phone instantly, heart jumping. It was still on the table, still dark. No outgoing call. No missed call. Nothing. His phone kept ringing. I laughed, because my brain panicked and reached for humor like a life raft. I told myself it was a coincidence. Wrong contact saved. Glitch, spoofed number. There are explanations. But my chest felt tight anyway. He looked from the phone to me, confusion spreading across his face slowly, like ink in water. He picked it up, then stopped. He didn't answer. He just stared at it. I picked up my phone and unlocked it, hands shaking. No active call. No timer running. Nothing in my recent calls. His phone stopped ringing. The silence that followed felt loud, heavier than the restaurant noise. He asked if I tried calling him. I shook my head immediately. I told him I didn't even have his number saved yet. That was true. We'd been messaging through the app. He scrolled through his call log and turned the phone slightly so I could see. Incoming call. My name. My number. My number. I felt dizzy. I told him to call it back. I wanted to hear my phone ring. I wanted proof this was just some stupid tech issue. He hesitated. Then he tapped the screen. My phone rang. Same ringtone. Same vibration. Right there on the table between us. I grabbed it fast, my heart pounding. The caller ID showed his name. I stared at the screen, my brain trying to catch up to itself. His phone was still in his hand. My phone was ringing in mine. I declined the call. Both phones went silent. Neither of us spoke for a second. Forks scraped at nearby tables. Someone laughed near the bar. The rain kept tapping the windows like nothing strange was happening. I asked him how long he'd had my number. He said only since we matched. He said he copied it from my profile when we planned the date. He said he hadn't saved it anywhere else. I told him I hadn't given my number out to anyone else recently. I told him I hadn't used it for anything weird. My voice sounded thin even to me. His phone buzzed again. Same ringtone. My name. Calling. This time, I didn't even look at my own phone. I already knew what I'd see. He didn't answer. He set his phone down like it was hot. It kept ringing, vibrating against the table, inching closer to the edge. Then it stopped. A second later, my phone buzzed with a missed call notification. From myself. I felt sick. I opened the call details. The timestamp was current. The duration was 0 seconds. The location tag showed the restaurant. I looked at him. His face had gone pale. He didn't look amused anymore. He looked scared in a quiet way, like he didn't want to make it real by reacting too much. He asked if I was messing with him. I shook my head hard. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the phone with both hands. I told him this wasn't funny. I told him I didn't know how this was happening. His phone rang again. This time he answered. I didn't hear anything at first. He held it to his ear listening. His expression shifted, eyes widening slightly. Then my phone buzzed in my hand. Voicemail notification. I stared at it, my breath shallow. I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't left anything. He pulled the phone away from his ear slowly and looked at me. He said he could hear me breathing. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. I checked my phone screen. No active call. No recording. Nothing. I asked what else he heard. He swallowed and said my voice. Not talking, just breathing, close to the mic. I felt cold all over. My phone buzzed again. Another missed call. Another voicemail. I opened it before I could talk myself out of it. It was my voice. Not a recording I recognized. Not something I remembered saying. It sounded tired, scared. It said his name. It said the restaurant name. It said I was running out of time. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the table, drawing looks from the next table over. I didn't care. He asked me where I was. I told him I was right there. I told him I hadn't gone anywhere. His phone buzzed again, but this time he didn't look at it. He looked at me like he was trying to memorize my face. I picked my phone back up with shaking hands and checked my location services. Everything said I was there. Live location. Active. Normal. But there was another location pane underneath. Same timestamp. Same restaurant. Slightly different coordinates. I felt like I was going to pass out. I told him I needed to leave. I didn't explain. I just stood up, grabbing my jacket. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to move. He stood too, glancing around like he expected someone to be watching us. His phone rang again, louder this time, echoing in the small space. The host glanced over. People stared. I grabbed my bag and walked fast toward the door. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what he was doing or who his phone said was calling. Outside, the rain had slowed. The air felt cold and sharp. I stood under the awning, shaking, trying to breathe. My phone rang. My own name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. It stopped. A voicemail notification appeared instantly. I didn't listen to it. I turned my phone off completely and walked until my feet hurt. I didn't take a ride. I didn't check messages. I just needed distance. When I got home, I turned my phone back on. No missed calls. No voicemails. Nothing. Except a message draft saved in my notes app. Typed at a time when I was sitting in that restaurant. It said I was almost there and hoped he could wait a little longer. I thought I was finally past the phase where every date felt like a test I didn't study for. I almost canceled that night, not because I was scared, but because I was tired in a bone-deep way that makes everything feel pointless. But she picked the place, and it was close to my apartment, and I told myself it would be easier to just go than sit alone with my thoughts again. The bar was one of those old converted train stations, all exposed beams and long windows, lights low enough to hide flaws. I liked it because it felt anonymous. Lots of people, lots of noise, nobody paying attention. I got there early and sat at the bar, watching condensation slide down my glass, trying not to think about anything specific. She walked in 10 minutes later wearing a long, dark coat. Nothing about her stood out at first. Average height, quiet smile, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much, but didn't want to talk about it. She spotted me quickly and waved like she was relieved. That should have been my first clue, but I ignored it. We grabbed a small table near the window. The street outside reflected back at us in pieces, headlights breaking the glass into fragments. We talked about normal stuff. Work. The city. How cold it was getting. I remember thinking she felt easy to talk to, like there were no sharp edges yet. I didn't bring up my ex. I almost never do. People know the headline version anyway. She went missing 3 years ago. No body. No answers. Just a timeline that stops. I learned early that saying it out loud changes the room, so I keep it quiet. The drinks came. I relaxed a little. The music was loud enough that we had to lean in slightly, but not enough to feel trapped. Everything felt normal. Boring even. I remember thinking boring was good. Then she mentioned the cold again and shrugged her shoulders, like she was uncomfortable. She reached up and started unbuttoning her coat. I wasn't really paying attention at first. My eyes were on my glass. Then the fabric shifted and my brain caught up too late. Under the coat, she was wearing the exact outfit my ex wore the night she vanished. Not similar. Not close. Exact. Same faded band tee with a small tear near the hem. Same dark jeans with a rip at the knee that I'd begged her to stop wearing in winter. Same scuffed boots with a loose lace on the left one. Even the way the shirt hung slightly crooked because one shoulder seam was stretched. My chest tightened so fast it hurt. She slid the coat off completely and draped it over the back of her chair like nothing was wrong. I stared at her, my heart pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. The bar noise faded into a dull roar. I felt like I was looking at a photograph that had come to life. I asked where she got the shirt. She looked down at herself like she'd almost forgotten what she was wearing. She smiled and said she liked vintage stuff. She said clothes had history. My hands started shaking. I wrapped them around my glass to hide it. I told her that outfit looked familiar. She nodded slowly. She said it should. That was when I knew this wasn't a coincidence. I asked her to change the subject. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice came out wrong, thin, tight. She didn't push. She just watched me, eyes calm, waiting. I asked how she knew about my ex. She tilted her head slightly. She said people talk. She said stories linger longer than faces. I told her that outfit wasn't public knowledge. It wasn't in the news articles. There were no clear photos. I knew because I'd looked, over and over, trying to remember every detail myself. She nodded again, like she'd expected that. She said she didn't find it online. My stomach dropped. I asked where she found it. She said she didn't find it. She said it was given to her. Given. My mind raced. I thought about donation bins, thrift stores, random chance. But every explanation fell apart under the weight of how exact it was. Even the smell was the same. Faint detergent and something else I couldn't name. Something familiar. I asked who gave it to her. She paused. Just long enough to feel intentional. Then she said someone who didn't need it anymore. My heart felt like it was going to punch out of my chest. I stood up halfway and sat back down because my legs felt weak. People around us laughed, talked, clinked glasses. Nobody noticed my world folding in on itself. I told her to take the shirt off. She didn't move. She said she knew it would be hard to see. She said that was why she waited until we talked a bit first. She said she didn't want to scare me right away. Right away. I asked her if she knew where Max was. She looked at me with something like sympathy. She said knowing and understanding weren't the same thing. She said some people disappear without leaving, and some people leave without disappearing. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. I told her this wasn't funny. I told her it was messed up. I told her to stop. She sighed softly and finally reached for the hem of the shirt, tugging it down like she was self-conscious. She said she wasn't trying to hurt me. She said she thought seeing it might help. Help with what? She said closure. That word made me want to scream. I asked her why she wore it here. Why now? She said because this was where my ex had wanted to come that night. She said plans change, but intentions stick. My blood ran cold. I asked how she knew that. She leaned back and glanced around the bar like she was checking if anyone was listening. She said some things get passed along with the clothes. She said emotions soak in deeper than people realize. I stood up again, this time forcing my legs to cooperate. I grabbed my jacket and stepped back. She stayed seated. She looked sad now, not manipulative sad, tired sad. She said I always reacted like this. That sentence broke something in me. I asked what she meant by always. She said she'd worn it before. She said sometimes it took longer for me to notice. She said sometimes I didn't come back after. She said sometimes I did. I backed away from the table, shaking my head. I told her she was confusing me with someone else. She shook her head gently. She said she wasn't. I asked her what happened to my ex. She looked down at the shirt, smoothing the fabric over her stomach like it mattered. She said people don't always leave in one piece. She said sometimes what's left behind finds its way forward. I felt sick. I turned and walked toward the exit, not caring how it looked. I pushed through the door and into the cold night air, breathing hard. My hands were shaking so badly I had to lean against the wall. After a minute, I looked back through the window. She was still at the table. She had put the coat back on, but the shirt collar was still visible. I walked home instead of calling a ride, needing the movement, the distance. My thoughts raced the whole way. Every shadow felt heavier. Every reflection felt wrong. When I got home, I went straight to my closet. I dug through old boxes I hadn't opened in years, memories I tried to keep buried. At the bottom of one box, folded carefully, was a spare band tee my ex owned. Same band, same print, but it was the wrong size. I sat on the floor staring at it, my heart pounding. My phone buzzed. A message from her. She said she hoped I wasn't mad. She said she just wanted to return something eventually. I blocked the number. I haven't gone back to that bar. I avoid long coats now. Certain shirts make my chest tighten. Sometimes I wonder how many times I've seen that outfit without realizing why it hurt. I didn't plan on staying long, which is funny considering how hard it was to leave. I walked into that restaurant already half checked out, telling myself it was just another awkward night I'd forget by the weekend. I remember thinking the place smelled like old carpet and fried food, like it had been there forever and would keep being there no matter who came through. It felt safe in a boring way. She was sitting in a booth near the window, tapping her fingers on the table like she was keeping time with something only she could hear. She smiled when she saw me, a soft, familiar smile that made my chest loosen, even though I knew I didn't recognize her. Not really. Sometimes faces just feel familiar. I didn't question it. We ordered drinks. We talked about normal stuff. Work, bad bosses, shows we pretended to like. Nothing deep. Nothing heavy. She laughed at my jokes in a way that felt practiced, like she knew when the laugh was supposed to happen. I noticed it, but I didn't think much of it. Some people are just like that. The restaurant itself felt stuck in time. Wood paneling, low lights, framed photos that had faded into brownish ghosts. The kind of place where the staff looks like they've been there longer than the furniture. That detail matters later. The server brought our food and set it down with a nod like he'd done it 1,000 times before. When he looked at me, his eyes lingered a beat too long. Not rude, more confused. I ignored it. We ate. She barely touched her plate. She watched me more than the food. Every time I paused, she smiled like she was relieved I was still there. That should have bothered me more than it did. About 40 minutes in, I knew I was done. Not scared yet, just done. The conversation felt like it was looping. Stories repeating with slightly different wording. I felt tired in a way that didn't match the time of night. I told her I should get going. I said it casually, already reaching for my jacket. Her smile slipped for half a second. Then it came back. She nodded slowly like she understood, but her eyes didn't leave my face. I stood up and slid out of the booth. That's when the server came over again. He asked if everything was okay. I said yeah. I thanked him and turned toward the front. He didn't move. He asked why I was leaving again. Again. I laughed awkwardly and said he must be mixing me up with someone else. His face didn't change. Not angry. Not amused. Just tired, like someone who's seen this before and knows how it ends. He said I always say that part. My stomach dropped. I looked back at the booth. She was still sitting there, hands folded, watching us. She didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked resigned, like this was the part she hated the most. Another staff member stepped closer, an older woman with gray hair pulled tight. She looked at me with something between concern and annoyance. She asked why I kept abandoning my wife like this. The word hit me hard. Wife. I felt heat rush to my face. People nearby turned to look. I shook my head, telling them they were wrong, telling them I'd never been here before, telling them I didn't even know her that well. The older woman sighed. She said I said that last time too. She said I'd stormed out just like this, jacket half on, acting confused. She said my wife cried after I left. I stared at her, my heart pounding. I told her that woman was not my wife. She glanced at the booth, then back at me. She said papers didn't lie. She said she'd seen them herself after the first incident. She said she remembered because it was messy and uncomfortable, and nobody likes domestic stuff in a restaurant. My ears rang. I asked what papers. She said the kind people sign when they make things official, the kind with witnesses. I felt dizzy. I looked at the woman in the booth again. She hadn't moved. Her expression was calm, sad, patient, like someone waiting for a storm to pass. I asked her to tell them the truth. She didn't stand. She didn't raise her voice. She just shook her head slowly. Her eyes never left mine. The server said I should sit back down and finish my meal. He said leaving like this only made it worse later. Worse later. I backed toward the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grab the handle. I told them I was calling someone. I told them this was insane. The older woman crossed her arms. She said I did that last time too. She said the police came and everything got awkward. She said I promised I wouldn't do this again. My heart felt like it was going to tear out of my chest. I pushed the door open and stepped outside. Cold air hit me like a wall. I sucked it in, tried to ground myself. I stood there shaking, staring at the street, at passing cars, at anything real. Behind me, the door opened again. The server leaned out and asked if I was really going to leave her there alone again. Again. I turned around and shouted that I didn't know her, that I'd never been married, that they were all wrong. He looked genuinely sad. He said that's exactly what I said last time. He said I even cried a little then. The door closed. I stood there on the sidewalk, heart racing, head spinning. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I'd stepped into the wrong life by accident. I walked away, fast, not running, but close. I didn't look back. I drove home shaking, checking my mirrors the whole way like someone might be following me. When I got inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. I pulled out my phone and searched my name. Nothing unusual. Then I searched my name with hers. Results came up. A public record page. Marriage license. Date from 3 years ago. My name, her name. Correct spelling. Correct birth date. Correct everything. My hands went numb. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. I checked another site. Same result. I scrolled through old photos on my phone looking for anything that didn't belong. I found a folder I didn't remember making. Photos of that restaurant, that booth, her across from me smiling. Timestamps from months ago. I dropped the phone. There was a knock at my door. I didn't answer it. I sat on my couch all night, lights on, listening to every sound. My phone buzzed once with a message preview from an unknown number. It said she just wanted me to come back and talk like we used to. I turned the phone off. I don't go near that side of town anymore. Sometimes I still wonder how many times I've already left without remembering. I didn't even need the bathroom that bad. That's the part that annoys me most when I think back on it. I just wanted a break. A minute away from the table, away from the way he kept leaning in like the space between us was temporary. I remember standing up and grabbing my bag, already halfway out of the conversation in my head. The place was this converted warehouse restaurant near the river, all exposed brick and low-hanging lights. The kind of spot that tries to feel casual but still charges way too much for everything. It was loud enough that you had to lean in to talk, which meant you never really got personal space. I picked it because it was popular and busy. Busy feels safer. That's the lie I keep telling myself. He'd been fine up until then. Not amazing, not terrible. Just there. He laughed at the right times, told stories that went a bit too long, but nothing alarming. I remember thinking the worst thing about the night was going to be how bored I felt. I excused myself and walked toward the back where the bathrooms were. The hallway was narrow and dimmer than the main room, the noise fading as I moved farther away. I remember noticing how quiet it got, like the building swallowed sound once you stepped out of the dining area. The bathroom door was heavy and creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, it smelled like cheap soap and cleaner. 2 sinks, cracked mirror, 3 stalls. One of the stalls was occupied. I could see shoes beneath the door. I didn't think anything of it at first. I went to the far sink and washed my hands, even though I didn't need to, just to buy myself time. I leaned forward, staring at my reflection, telling myself to relax. Everything was fine. I was being dramatic again. That's when I heard his voice. Not from the hallway. From the stall. My stomach dropped so hard I had to grab the edge of the sink to steady myself. My heart started racing instantly, that full body panic that hits before logic can catch up. It was his voice exactly. Same tone, same slight rasp, same pacing. He sounded scared. Not fake scared. Real, like he was trying to keep himself together. He was begging me not to come in. Not shouting. Not whispering. Urgent and low, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. My brain short-circuited. I stood there frozen, staring at the mirror while my reflection slowly realized what was happening. My hands started shaking. I checked the door behind me, half expecting to see him standing there too. The stall door rattled slightly, like someone had shifted their weight inside. I felt dizzy. I told myself there had to be an explanation, someone messing with me. Coincidence. Someone who sounded like him. But the voice knew details. It used my name. It said things only he'd heard me say at the table minutes earlier. It said not to open the door no matter what I heard next. My throat went dry. I could barely swallow. I stepped back slowly, my shoes scuffing against the tile. The voice got more frantic. It told me something bad would happen if I opened the stall. It told me to leave the bathroom and not look back. I glanced down at the shoes under the door. They weren't his. Different color. Different shape. I remembered his shoes clearly because I'd noticed a scuff on the toe earlier. My heart pounded so loud I was sure someone outside could hear it. The voice kept going, sounding more desperate by the second. It sounded like it was crying now, breaking in places that made my chest ache. It told me it was stuck. It told me it didn't have much time. I felt tears prick at my eyes, not because I believed it, but because my body was reacting to the sound of someone in pain. Even when your brain knows better, your instincts don't shut off that easily. I whispered his name without meaning to. The voice answered immediately. That was when something behind me moved. I caught it in the mirror first, the bathroom door opening slowly. Someone stepping inside. I turned. He was standing there. Real. Solid. Breathing. He looked confused when he saw me frozen in the middle of the bathroom, pale and shaking. He asked if I was okay, his voice calm and normal and completely different from the one coming from the stall. I screamed. It came out raw and loud and uncontrollable. He flinched back, hands up, clearly shocked. The stall went silent instantly. No more voice. No movement. I backed away from both of them, my heart slamming against my ribs. My brain felt like it was tearing itself in half trying to process two versions of the same person existing at once. He took a step toward me. I told him to stop. My voice shook so badly I barely recognized it. He looked hurt, confused, embarrassed. He said people were staring. I glanced past him. The bathroom door was still open. I could hear voices from the restaurant now, laughter, clinking glasses. The world felt too normal for what had just happened. I pointed at the stall and asked him who was in there. He looked where I pointed, then back at me. He said nobody. He said he'd just come in and there was only one other person earlier who'd left already. That didn't make sense. I'd seen the shoes. I'd heard the voice. I told him his voice was coming from inside the stall. His face changed then. Not fear. Not confusion. Something closer to concern mixed with irritation, like I'd broken our rule. He told me I must be overtired. He told me the place had weird acoustics. He told me voices echoed in strange ways. The stall door creaked slightly, like someone shifting again. I backed toward the exit, my entire body buzzing with adrenaline. I told him I was leaving. I didn't care how it sounded anymore. He reached out to grab my arm. I pulled away so hard I almost fell. The stall door shook violently. Then the voice came back. Louder this time. It sounded like him but wrong, stretched thin, like a recording played through bad speakers. It begged me again not to listen to the man behind me. It said he wasn't real. It said he never was. He turned toward the stall, his face pale now. He told whoever was inside to stop. His voice cracked slightly. That was enough. I ran. I shoved past him, out of the bathroom and the hallway, ignoring people who stared as I burst back into the dining area. I grabbed my bag from the table and kept moving. I didn't stop to explain. I didn't look back. I pushed through the front door and into the night air, gasping like I'd been underwater. My hands shook so badly I dropped my keys once before managing to unlock my car. I sat there with the doors locked, staring at the entrance. After a minute, he came out. Alone. He stood on the sidewalk scanning the parking lot, his face tight with frustration. He looked at my car and took a step toward it. Then he stopped. The bathroom door inside the restaurant swung open. I couldn't see who came out, but I saw his head snap toward it. His shoulders stiffened. He took a step back like he'd been hit. He didn't follow me after that. I drove home shaking, replaying the sound of that voice over and over. The way it knew me, the way it begged. Later that night, I got a text from an unknown number. It asked if I made it home safe. I blocked it. Sometimes when I'm in public bathrooms now, I wait outside until I'm sure every stall is empty. Sometimes I still hear his voice in places it shouldn't be. I noticed the window before I noticed him acting strange, and that's probably why it stuck with me the way it did. The restaurant had this long glass wall facing the street, not a mirror exactly, just reflective enough at night to catch movement and faces. I like places like that. I like being able to see outside and inside at the same time, like nothing is hidden. I didn't know that would be the thing that ruined the night. We met at a mid-range place downtown, not fancy, not cheap. Brick walls, hanging lights, open kitchen noise. It felt busy in a comforting way. I got there early and picked a table near the window because I like watching people walk past, making up little stories in my head. It keeps my brain occupied. He showed up a few minutes later, looking exactly like his photos. That already felt like a win. Tall, clean jacket, relaxed smile. He leaned in to greet me and sat down across from me, back to the room, facing the window. That meant I could see his reflection behind him. At first, it was normal. Just the usual doubled image, slightly darker, slightly warped by the glass. I caught my own reflection too when I moved, my face floating behind his shoulder. We ordered, talked about boring stuff, the usual first date filler. I relaxed faster than I usually do. He was easy to talk to. He laughed at the right times. He didn't interrupt. I remember thinking the worst thing about the night might be the food being overpriced. Then I noticed the lag. It was tiny. Almost nothing. I lifted my glass to take a sip, and in the window, the reflection of his hand moved just a fraction of a second later than it should have. Not enough to scream about. More like the kind of delay you get with bad Wi-Fi. I blinked and watched more closely. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. In the glass, his reflection leaned forward too, but slower, like it was thinking about it first. I told myself it was the lighting. Reflections do weird things. Angles matter. I didn't want to be that person who ruins a date by staring at a window. But once you see something like that, it's hard to stop checking. Every time he moved, my eyes flicked to the glass. Every time there was that same tiny delay. His real hand would tap the table, then the reflected hand would follow. His head would tilt, then the reflection would catch up. My chest tightened a little. I shifted in my seat. He asked if I was cold. I said no. The food came. Plates clinked down. Steam rose. I picked at my meal, pretending everything was fine. My appetite faded, replaced by this buzzing alertness under my skin. I tested it. I scratched my cheek casually and watched the window. My reflection moved exactly when I did. His did not. His reflection stayed still for a beat too long, then lifted its hand, but not to the same spot. It touched the side of its face, not the cheek. I froze. He didn't notice. He was talking about something dumb, a story about work that I couldn't focus on. My heart started pounding in my ears. I shifted my leg under the table. His reflection didn't. I swallowed hard. I moved my hand across the table, slowly, deliberately, like I was stretching. In the glass, his reflection stayed frozen, staring straight ahead, hands still folded. Then, after a moment, it moved. But it didn't copy him. It copied me. My breath caught in my throat. The reflected hand lifted, matching my movement exactly, even though his real hand stayed on the table. The reflection's fingers flexed when mine did. The timing was perfect. Better than before. I stared at the window, my heart racing, my thoughts spiraling. The reflected face still looked like him, but the eyes were wrong. They were focused on me, not on the table where his real eyes were looking. I felt dizzy. I moved my hand again, faster this time. The reflection matched me instantly. His real body did nothing. My skin crawled. I pulled my hand back into my lap and looked at him directly, forcing myself to ground in the real. He was still talking, still smiling, still completely normal. He hadn't noticed anything off. I glanced back at the window. The reflection was still watching me. Not copying now, just watching. I shifted in my seat, heart hammering. I told myself to stop. I told myself I was tired, overthinking, letting my imagination run wild. But my body didn't listen. I stood up abruptly, saying I needed the bathroom. My chair scraped loudly. He paused mid-sentence, looking confused, but nodded. I walked away quickly, not running, but close. I didn't look at the window again until I reached the hallway leading to the bathrooms. My legs felt weak. Inside the bathroom, the mirrors were normal. Blessedly normal. My reflection moved when I did. No delay. No independence. I splashed water on my face and took deep breaths, trying to slow my heart. I told myself I'd finish the date quickly and leave. No scene. No explanation. When I walked back out, I slowed near the doorway, forcing myself to look at the window again. His reflection was still seated at the table. His real body was too. But they weren't doing the same thing. His real self was scrolling on his phone, head down. The reflection was upright, facing forward. Facing me. The reflected version smiled. I stopped walking. My chest felt tight, like something was pressing down on it. I scanned the room. Nobody else seemed to notice anything wrong. People ate, laughed, waved servers over. Life went on. I took a step forward. The reflection stood up. His real body stayed seated. I felt panic spike through me, sharp and sudden. I turned away and walked fast, straight out the front door, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I didn't care if it looked rude. I didn't care if he followed. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I kept walking, then broke into a jog, not stopping until I was half a block away. I leaned against a wall, gasping, trying to get my breathing under control. After a minute, I risked a look back. Through the restaurant window, I could see the table. His chair was empty, but the reflection was still there, standing, watching the door. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I locked the doors and sat there shaking, staring straight ahead. I waited for him to come out. He never did. The next day, I checked the app. His profile was still there. Same photos, same bio. But when I looked closely, something felt off. In every picture, his reflection was slightly different. I noticed the blood before I noticed anything else about her, and that still messes with me when I think about it. Not her smile, not her voice, not the way she sat. My brain clocked the red first, like it was a warning label slapped right onto the night. I almost backed out right then, but the door was already closing behind me, and it felt rude to turn around over something I couldn't even explain yet. We met at a late-night dessert place near campus, one of those spots that only exist because students don't sleep. Neon sign, sticky floors, too many mirrors. It smelled like sugar and burnt coffee. I picked it because it was bright and crowded and open late, which usually makes me feel safer. Nothing bad is supposed to happen under fluorescent lights. She was already there, sitting at a small table near the window. I remember thinking she looked tired, not in a sad way, just worn down like someone who had had a long week. I slid into the chair across from her, and that's when I saw her hands resting on the table. There were dark red smears across her palms and fingers. Not dripping, not fresh enough to be wet, but not dry either, like she just washed them badly. My stomach flipped. I stared for a second too long. She noticed and pulled her hands back slightly, tucking them under the table. She smiled like she knew exactly what I'd seen. I asked if she was okay. I tried to keep it casual, but my voice sounded tight even to me. She said she was fine. She said it always looked worse than it was. That didn't help. We ordered anyway. I don't remember what. Something sweet. Something easy. My brain was busy replaying the image of her hands over and over, trying to figure out how someone bleeds without being hurt. When the server walked away, she put her hands back on the table. The blood was more visible now under the lights. I leaned forward without thinking, scanning for cuts, scrapes, anything. There was nothing. Her skin looked normal. No broken nails. No torn knuckles. No bandages. I asked where the blood came from. She glanced down at her hands like she'd almost forgotten about it. Then she said it wasn't hers. That made my chest feel hollow. I laughed awkwardly because that's what you do when something doesn't fit into your reality. I told myself she meant she helped someone earlier, or spilled something, or had a weird job. People work in kitchens. People do first aid. There are explanations. She didn't rush to give one. She wiped her palms together slowly, smearing the red into lighter streaks. It looked wrong, like watching someone rub paint into their skin. She told me it belonged to the other dates. Not joking, not smiling, just stating like a fact. My brain froze. I felt like I missed a step in the conversation, like she'd skipped ahead to something I wasn't supposed to know yet. I waited for her to laugh or explain or say she was kidding. She didn't. I asked what she meant, even though every part of me was screaming that I didn't want the answer. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms, smearing more red onto her sleeves. She said sometimes things get messy. She said not everyone handles rejection well. She said it adds up after a while. I stared at her, trying to match her words to reality. The dessert place buzzed around us. People laughed. Blenders whirred. A couple at the next table took photos of their food. Nobody else seemed to notice the blood. I asked if she was serious. She nodded. She said it like it was normal, like it was part of the process. I told her she was scaring me. My hands were shaking now, and I pressed them between my knees to hide it. She looked genuinely confused by that. She said she didn't understand why. She said she wasn't the one who got hurt tonight. That word stuck with me. Tonight. I asked how many other dates there had been. She shrugged. She said she didn't keep track anymore. She said faces blur together after a while. Reactions don't. She said everyone has a moment where they realize something is wrong, and that moment always looks the same. I felt dizzy. My mouth tasted like metal. I glanced at the door, then at the windows, then back at her. She noticed and smiled softly, like she found my panic familiar. She said I didn't need to worry. She said I seemed calmer than most. That didn't make me feel better. Our food came. The server set the plates down and froze for half a second when he saw her hands. His eyes flicked to her face, then to me. She smiled at him and pulled her hands into her lap again. He hesitated, then walked away fast. I pushed my plate away, suddenly nauseous. I asked where the other dates were now. She tilted her head, thinking. She said some of them went home. She said some of them stopped answering messages. She said some of them didn't finish the night. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I asked if she was talking about hurting them. She frowned like I was oversimplifying. She said hurt was a strong word. She said things happen when people don't listen. She said she tries to be clear about what she expects. I asked what she expected from me. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, hands still hidden. She said honesty. She said attention. She said she didn't like being ignored once she'd invested time. Invested. I thought about the blood again. About how casually she'd admitted it wasn't hers. About how she didn't seem worried someone might notice, like she was used to this moment and knew how it would play out. I told her I needed to leave. I said it plainly. No excuses. Her face changed then. Not anger. Disappointment. Like I failed a test I didn't know I was taking. She asked if it was because of the blood. I nodded because lying felt pointless. She sighed and brought her hands back up, palms facing me. The red had darkened now, drawing into the lines of her skin. She said she should have washed up better. She said first impressions matter. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly. Heads turned. I didn't care. I grabbed my bag and stepped back. She stayed seated. She didn't try to stop me. She just watched, eyes steady, like she was memorizing me. I walked fast toward the door, my heart racing. My hands were slick with sweat. I pushed through the door and sucked in the cold night air like I had been underwater. I didn't stop walking until I was halfway down the block. Then I turned around. She was standing by the window, watching me leave. She raised one hand in a small wave. Even from that distance, I could see the dark stains on her palm. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her hands, saw the way she rubbed the blood in like it belonged there. A few days later, I got a message from an unknown number. It was just my name, spelled correctly, nothing else. I blocked it immediately. I still check my hands sometimes when I get nervous. half expecting to see red that doesn't belong to me. I didn't even want dinner. I agreed to it because it was easier than saying no again, and because the place he picked looked busy in the photos. I like busy. Busy means witnesses. I remember standing on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, reading the address, watching people go in and out, telling myself I was being dramatic. Nothing bad had happened yet. It was just a date. That's how every bad night starts, with that sentence repeating in your head like it means something. The restaurant sat on a corner, all brick and warm light, with big windows that showed packed tables and servers moving fast. Inside looked loud and safe. I took a breath and went in. He was already there, standing near the host's stand, smiling like he'd been waiting longer than he actually had. He leaned in for a hug that lasted a second too long, then pulled back like nothing happened. I ignored the weird pinch in my stomach and followed him to the table. We were seated near the middle of the room, not too close to the door, not too deep either. I noticed that right away. I noticed exits without meaning to. The table was small, the kind where your knees almost touch. Candles everywhere, low music, lots of voices overlapping. I felt a little better once we sat down. He talked a lot. About himself, about places he liked, how he hated being stuck inside. He kept mentioning how nice it was outside, how the air felt different that night, how he liked walking after eating. I nodded along, barely listening, trying to decide if I was actually hungry. A waiter came over with menus, or at least I thought menus. He handed one to him like normal. Then he turned to me. Instead of a menu, he slid a small folded piece of paper onto the table, right next to my hand. His fingers brushed mine, just barely, and he looked me straight in the eyes for half a second longer than necessary. His face didn't change. No smile. No warning look. Just flat focus. Then he asked us about drinks like everything was fine. I stared at the paper without opening it. My heart started beating faster for no good reason, or maybe for a very good one my brain hadn't caught up to yet. I waited until the waiter walked away before unfolding it, keeping the paper low, hidden by the edge of the table. The handwriting was messy but clear. Don't let him take you outside. That was it. No name, no explanation, just that sentence. My mouth went dry instantly. I folded the paper back up and slid it under my leg on the seat, pressing my thigh against it like I could erase it by hiding it. My hands started to shake, so I grabbed my water glass to give them something to do. He was watching me. Not in an obvious way. More like he was waiting for a reaction he expected. His eyes flicked down to the table, then back up to my face. I forced myself to act normal. I nodded at something he said. I smiled when it seemed right. Inside, my thoughts were crashing into each other. I told myself there had to be a reason. Maybe the waiter made a mistake. Maybe it was some kind of joke. Maybe it was meant for someone else. But the way the waiter had looked at me didn't match that. It felt intentional. Urgent. The waiter came back with drinks. He didn't look at me this time. He set the glasses down and left quickly. I noticed his hand shaking slightly as he walked away. I slid the folded note into my bag when he wasn't looking. The food order felt automatic. I don't remember what I picked. I just remember nodding and saying yes when asked. He ordered confidently, like he already knew the place well. That stood out to me too. While we waited, he kept bringing up going for a walk after. He said it would be quieter once we were done. He said the street behind the restaurant was his favorite. He said he liked showing people things. Every time he mentioned outside, my stomach tightened. I scanned the room, trying to see if anyone else was watching us. Couples leaned into each other. A group of friends laughed too loud near the bar. Everything looked normal. That almost made it worse. The food came. I picked at it, barely tasting anything. My brain kept replaying the note, the exact wording, the way the paper felt in my hand. Don't let him take you outside. Not don't go outside. Not be careful. Don't let him take you, like it had happened before. I tried to casually bring up leaving soon, like I had somewhere else to be. He frowned, just a little, then smiled again and said we had time. He said nights like this shouldn't be rushed. I asked him how often he came here. He said often enough. That didn't help. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself to the bathroom, grabbing my bag. My legs felt weak as I stood up. I walked fast, not wanting him to follow. Inside the bathroom, I locked myself into a stall and took the note out again, smoothing it flat at my knee like maybe more words would appear. They didn't. I stared at my reflection in the metal door, trying to calm my breathing. I considered leaving right then, just walking out the door and not looking back. But the note didn't say leave. It said, don't let him take you outside. That felt specific. But leaving alone was different. I washed my hands longer than necessary and stepped back out. The waiter was standing near the sinks, pretending to restock paper towels. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away. My heart pounded. I walked past him slowly. When I was close enough, I whispered that I saw the note. His shoulders dropped like he'd been holding his breath. He didn't look at me, but he nodded once. He whispered back that I needed to stay inside. He said if I wanted help, I should say I was waiting for a friend. Before I could ask anything else, he straightened up and walked away. I went back to the table with my chest tight and my head buzzing. He asked if everything was okay. I said yes too fast. He smiled like he believed me. The rest of the meal felt stretched, like time was thick and sticky. Every time someone opened the door, cold air rushed in, and he glanced over like he was checking the clock. He finished eating before me and sat there watching. When I said I was full, he suggested we step outside to talk without the noise. I shook my head. I said I liked it inside. His smile thinned. He said it would just be a minute. I said no again, firmer this time. I said I was actually waiting for a friend to meet me here. That changed everything. His face didn't twist into anger like you'd expect. It went blank, like a screen turning off. He leaned back in his chair and studied me, really studied me, like he was trying to decide something. He asked who. I named the first person that came to mind, my cousin. I said she was running late. He nodded slowly. He said that was fine. He said he could wait too. I pulled my phone out and pretended to text, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I didn't actually send anything. I just stared at the screen, hoping someone would magically show up. The waiter came back with a check. He set it down closer to me than to him. Another small thing, but it felt deliberate. He offered to pay. I said I'd get it. He insisted. I insisted back. My voice came out sharper than I meant it to. Finally, he shrugged and let me pay. That's when he stood up. He reached for my bag. Said he'd carry it outside for me. My heart slammed against my ribs. I pulled the bag back hard, shaking my head. I said I'd carry it myself. He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. He said I was being weird. I stood up too, keeping the table between us. I scanned the room, locking eyes with the waiter across the floor. He was already moving, coming closer without running. I said my friend was here. I pointed behind him, not caring if it made sense. He turned to look. I walked fast. Not running, just fast enough to not look obvious. I went straight to the host stand and stood next to a group of people waiting for a table, blending in like I belonged there. I felt him behind me for a second, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Then he stopped. I didn't look back. The waiter came up beside me and asked if I needed help finding my party. I nodded. He walked me toward the front door, then past it, into the kitchen hallway instead. He pushed open a side door and told me to go out the back and not stop. I didn't hesitate. The alley was dark and smelled like garbage and rain. I walked fast, then faster until I hit the street and flagged down the first ride I saw. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. From the back seat, I looked through the window at the restaurant. I saw him standing near the door, scanning the sidewalk like he was counting. I still don't know what would have happened if I went outside with him. I don't want to. I didn't realize how loud her laugh was until the third time it happened, because the first two times my brain tried to excuse it. First time I thought she was reacting to something on her phone. Second time I thought maybe I missed a joke. By the third time I knew something was wrong, because nothing had changed except a stranger walking past our table. We were sitting outside this narrow street cafe downtown, the kind squeezed between buildings where people are constantly brushing by your chair. Metal tables, chipped paint, traffic noise mixed with music leaking from nearby shops. I picked it because it felt alive. Lots of movement, lots of people. I figured that meant less pressure. She showed up right on time, which already put her above most dates I've been on. She looked normal in that low-effort way that feels real. Oversized jacket, messy hair, tired eyes. I liked that. It felt honest. We ordered food and drinks and settled in. The table was a little wobbly, and she laughed when it rocked. A regular laugh. Nothing weird. We talked about classes, about bad roommates, about how the city feels different at night. I started relaxing. I remember thinking this might actually be fine. Then a guy in a delivery uniform walked past our table, close enough that his bag brushed my knee. She laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not a quick breath through the nose. A full burst, sharp and sudden, like something startled her from the inside. I looked at her confused. She leaned in toward me, still smiling, and lowered her voice. She said something quick and quiet, too quiet for me to fully process in the moment. I just caught a few words. Street, van, corner. I asked what she said. She waved it off, still smiling, and took a sip of her drink like nothing happened. I told myself she had a dark sense of humor. People joke about weird stuff. I've heard worse. A couple walked by next, holding hands, arguing softly. They slowed down near our table, then moved on. She laughed again. Same laugh. Same timing. She leaned in again and whispered. This time I caught more of it. Stairs. Winter. Head. My stomach tightened. I asked her what she was doing. She tilted her head and asked what I meant, like she genuinely didn't understand the question. Her eyes were bright, almost excited. Another person passed, an older woman with a cane moving carefully. Laugh. Whisper. I didn't even have to hear it this time. My body reacted before my brain could. My shoulders tensed. My hands curled into fists under the table. My appetite vanished completely. I asked her to stop. I tried to keep it light, like I was joking, but my voice came out tight. I told her it was freaking me out. She laughed again, but this time it wasn't triggered by anyone passing. It was aimed at me. She told me she couldn't help it. She told me it just slipped out sometimes. She said people were loud to her, even when they were quiet. Another guy walked by, headphones on, scrolling his phone, totally unaware. Laugh. Whisper. This time I heard it clearly. Heart. Bench. Morning. My chest felt like it dropped through my stomach. I stared at the guy walking away, suddenly seeing him like a character in a story I didn't want to read. I imagined him sitting on a bench, imagined the stillness she hinted at. I hated that my brain filled in the gaps so easily. I pushed my chair back slightly, creating space between us. She noticed. Her smile faded just a little, like she didn't like the change in distance. I asked her how she knew these things. She shrugged. She said she didn't know how she knew. She said it was like remembering something that hadn't happened yet. She said it was louder in busy places. A group of teenagers passed, laughing, bumping into each other. She laughed louder than she had all night. Her whisper was longer this time. Detailed. I didn't catch every word, but I caught enough. Car. Rain. Wrong seat. I felt dizzy. The sounds of the street blurred together. I started noticing every person who walked past, not as background, but as potential endings. My brain kept jumping ahead, trying to guess what she'd say next. I told her to please stop laughing when people walked by. I didn't care how it sounded anymore. I just wanted it to end. She looked at me for a long second, really looked, like she was deciding something. Then she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. She said she could stop whispering if I wanted. She said the laughing was harder. I asked her why she was laughing at all. She said it was nervous energy. She said it was the same reason people laugh at funerals sometimes. She said knowing something early messes with your head. I asked what she knew about me. She didn't answer right away. A man in a suit walked past, talking on his phone, clearly annoyed. Laugh. Whisper. I didn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. My skin crawled anyway. I stood up. I told her I needed air. I stepped away from the table, standing just far enough that I could still see her, but didn't have to hear her voice right next to me. She watched me, her expression calm, almost curious, like she was observing a reaction she expected. Another person passed between us, blocking my view for half a second. I heard her laugh again. That did it. I grabbed my jacket and told her I was leaving. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. I didn't sit back down. I didn't wait for her response. She didn't follow me. She didn't call after me. She just stayed seated, watching people pass, laughing at the world like it was a private joke. I walked fast, then faster. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting her to be behind me, whispering into my ear. She wasn't. When I got to my car, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on the curb for a minute before unlocking it. I tried to breathe normally. I tried to tell myself it was just a weird person with a messed up sense of humor. My phone buzzed. A message from her. I didn't open it right away. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I unlocked it. She told me she was sorry if she scared me. She said she usually waits longer before sharing that side of herself. She said she thought I could handle it. She added one more thing. She said she didn't laugh when I walked past the table because she couldn't see anything yet. That line stuck to me in a way nothing else did. For weeks after, every time someone laughed nearby, my heart jumped. Every time someone leaned in to whisper, I felt sick. I started watching how people walked, how they stood, like maybe I could see what she saw if I looked hard enough. I still sit with my back to the wall in public places. I still hate outdoor tables. I knew something was wrong before I even sat down, like my brain was already trying to hand me a warning I didn't want to open. It wasn't fear exactly. More like that heavy pause right before a bad idea finishes loading. I remember standing outside the restaurant staring at my reflection in the dark window and thinking I should just pretend I got the date wrong and leave. Instead, I went in because I didn't want to be dramatic and because I always convince myself I'm overreacting. The place was a casual sit-down spot near the highway, lots of wood paneling and fake plants that never die. The kind of restaurant where families go after long drives, nobody really looks at anyone else. I picked it because it felt neutral, safe, like nothing memorable could happen there. He was already inside, sitting in a booth against the wall. He smiled when he saw me and waved a little too eagerly. Not red flag eager, just enough to make me notice. I slid into the booth across from him, and the seat squeaked. I hated that it squeaked. It felt like announcing myself. We talked while waiting for menus. Small stuff. Work complaints, bad traffic, how the weather kept changing his mind. He nodded a lot. Too much. Like he already knew where the conversation was going and didn't need to steer it. The menus came. I didn't even think that hard about what to order. I picked something simple, something I always get when I don't want surprises. When the server came back, he ordered the exact same thing. Same sides, same sauce choice. I noticed it but brushed it off. Some people do that to avoid awkward comparisons. The wait felt longer than it should have. I kept noticing little things. How he watched the kitchen instead of me. How his hands rested on the table like he was waiting for a cue. How he didn't check his phone once. It felt he was fully present in a way that didn't feel flattering. When the plates finally came out, the smell hit me first. Familiar, comforting. I relaxed a little. Food usually fixes things. The server set the plates down and, without thinking, put mine slightly closer to me and his closer to him. That's when it started to go sideways. He didn't touch his plate. At first, I thought maybe he was waiting for me to start. Some people do that. I picked up my fork and took a bite. Halfway through chewing, I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. His fork moved toward my plate. Not hovering, not pointing. It landed in my food. I froze. My brain stalled out, trying to catch up. I watched his fork scoop a bite from my plate like it belonged there, like this was normal. He ate it calmly, like he'd done it 100 times. I stared at him, waiting for some kind of explanation to fill the space. A joke, an apology, something. Instead, he nodded to himself like something had gone right. Then he reached over again and took another bite from my plate. I pulled my plate closer to me, my heart starting to race. My appetite vanished instantly, replaced by this crawling discomfort under my skin. I glanced at his untouched plate, sitting there perfectly intact. He finally looked at me then, like he remembered I was part of this. His expression wasn't embarrassed. It wasn't defensive. It was almost relieved. He said this was how it went last time. Not as a question, not as a joke. As a statement. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. There was no last time. I knew that for a fact. I had never met him before the app. I would remember something like this. I asked what he meant, even though I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. He leaned back slightly and gestured at the table, at the plates, at the space between us. He said this was how we ate before. He said he remembered because he thought it was funny then too. He said I always ordered this. He said I never finished it. My hands started shaking. I shoved them under the table, pressing my palms against my thighs to steady them. The restaurant noise faded into the background, replaced by the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I told him he had to be mistaken. People get faces confused all the time. That's what I told myself too. But the way he looked at me didn't match that explanation. There was no confusion there, just certainty. He picked up his fork again. This time I moved my plate completely out of reach. He paused, fork hovering in the air, then slowly set it down. His eyes stayed on the plate, not on me, like the plate was the important part. He said I didn't like when he rushed. He said I usually let him take a few bites first before getting annoyed. He said tonight felt different. My mouth went dry. I took a sip of water and almost choked because my throat felt too tight. I scanned the room, counting exits without meaning to. Families laughed at nearby tables. A kid dropped fries on the floor. Nobody noticed us. I asked him where we supposedly met before. He shrugged. He said different places. He said sometimes it was this restaurant, sometimes somewhere else. He said details change, but the routine stays the same. Routine. That word stuck to me. He said we always sat across from each other. He said he always ordered what I ordered. He said he liked sharing even when I pretended I didn't. He said I used to tease him about it. I didn't tease him now. I couldn't even force a smile. I'd asked how many times this had happened. He hesitated, just barely. Then he said he stopped counting after a while. He said it was easier that way. I felt cold. Not temperature cold. Internal cold. Like something important had been unplugged. I asked why I didn't remember any of it. He frowned at that like it genuinely puzzled him. He said I never remembered at first. He said sometimes it took a few dates before things clicked. He said sometimes they never did. They. My hands clenched into fists. I asked what he meant by that. He explained it slowly, like he was worried I'd get overwhelmed. He said sometimes people drift away. He said sometimes they change their number, move, stop matching. He said sometimes they get upset and leave early like I was about to. He said sometimes he had to start over. My chair scraped loudly against the floor as I stood up. Heads turned this time. I didn't care. I grabbed my bag and backed away from the table. He stayed seated. He looked disappointed, but not surprised. Like this was one of the outcomes he planned for. He said I usually didn't leave before dessert. That broke something in me. I walked straight to the front, paid for my food without looking back, and left. The night air hit me hard, sharp and real. I sucked it in like I'd been underwater. I didn't stop walking until I reached my car. My hands shook so badly I dropped my keys twice. I locked the doors the second I got inside and sat there staring at the dark windshield. I kept thinking about how confidently he reached for my plate, how natural it looked, how practiced. On the drive home, I took a different route than usual without even deciding to. My brain was still in survival mode, mapping, adjusting. When I got home, I checked my phone. No new messages, no missed calls, nothing. But when I opened the app, his profile was gone. Not unmatched. Gone, like it had never existed. I stood in my kitchen staring at my counter, replaying the moment his fork crossed that invisible line, the casual way he did it, the certainty behind it. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that untouched plate sitting there waiting. I knew the night was off before the food even showed up, but I couldn't point to why at first. It was one of those feelings that sits low and quiet, like a phone buzzing on silent in another room. I almost canceled earlier because I was tired and didn't feel like pretending to be interesting, but I went anyway because staying home felt worse. That's how I end up in situations I later wish I could rewind. We met at this small diner on the edge of town, the kind that still has laminated menus and booths patched with duct tape underneath. The lights were too bright and made everyone look a little washed out. It felt that place people went when they didn't want to be recognized. I liked that about it. She was already there when I walked in, sitting in a booth near the back. She smiled like she was relieved I showed up, which made me relax a bit. I slid in across from her, the vinyl sticking to my jacket. We talked about normal stuff at first. Work, random classes we hated, how the town felt smaller every year. Nothing deep. Nothing heavy. I was grateful for that. My brother didn't come up. I didn't bring him up. I almost never do on first dates. It's not a secret, but it's also not something I want to explain over fries. He died a few years back, sudden and messy and unfinished, in the way deaths always are when they take someone too young. Most people know the basics. Nobody knows the details. Nobody knows the sounds. The waitress dropped off our drinks and left us alone again. The diner noise filled the space, forks scraping, a baby crying somewhere near the front, a cook yelling at nobody in particular. I felt grounded there, like nothing supernatural could slip through a place that ordinary. She hit her phone on the table face down. It buzzed once. She ignored it. We kept talking. She laughed at something I said and tucked her hair behind her ear in this awkward way that made me think she was nervous too. That made me feel better. I like knowing it's not just me. The food came. I started eating like I hadn't eaten all day because I hadn't. Halfway through, her phone buzzed again. This time she glanced at it and frowned a little, like she didn't expect the call. She picked it up and answered. I wasn't paying attention at first. I kept eating, staring at the ketchup bottle, thinking about whether I wanted pie after. Then her posture changed. Not dramatic, just enough. Her shoulders dropped in a way that didn't match her body. Her head tilted slightly to the side. And then I heard his voice. Not similar. Not close. His. It came out of her mouth wrong, like the sound didn't fit the shape of her face. It was flatter than I remembered, like it had been pressed through something, but the tone was exact. The rhythm. The way he dragged certain words. The lazy rise and fall that used to annoy me when we were kids. My brain rejected it before my body did. For a second, I thought the diner speakers were playing a recording. I actually looked around for a tab or a radio. There was nothing. Just her sitting across from me, holding a phone to her ear, using my dead brother's voice like it belonged to her. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. She said my nickname. Not the one everyone used. Not the shortened version of my name. The stupid one my brother made up when we were little that only he ever used. The one I hadn't heard out loud since the day he died. The one that still echoed sometimes when I was half asleep. My hands started shaking so hard I had to put the fork down. I felt like the diner was tilting, like the floor was about to slide out from under us. My ears rang, that high thin sound you get after something loud, except nothing loud had happened. She kept talking into the phone, nodding along, responding in that same voice. She used phrases he used to say all the time. Stuff that never made sense to anyone else. Inside jokes that weren't even jokes, just habits. Things that lived only between us. I watched her mouth move and couldn't line it up with the sound. It was like watching a bad dub where the timing is slightly off. I wanted to scream at her to stop, but my throat felt locked. I couldn't even swallow. My brother had a scar on his chin from when we were kids. I stared at her chin like my brain was trying to force it to appear there. It didn't. Of course it didn't. She looked exactly the same as she had when I walked in. Normal. Solid. Real. My heart felt like it was punching my ribs from the inside. She laughed into the phone using his laugh. Short, sharp, almost a bark. I felt tears burn behind my eyes, not the slow, sad kind, but the sudden, angry kind, the kind that comes when something sacred gets stepped on. She glanced at me while still on the call. Her eyes flicked over my face, and for a split second, something in them shifted, like she was checking my reaction, like this was part of something. That scared me more than the voice. The call ended. She lowered the phone and set it back on the table, screen down again like nothing strange had just happened. Like she hadn't just pulled my brother out of the ground and sat him between us. She looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to say something. I couldn't. My mind raced through every possible explanation. A coincidence. A prank. Someone messing with me, but none of it worked. Nobody knew that nickname. Nobody. I hadn't even typed it anywhere. I hadn't read it in a message. It lived only in my head. I finally asked who she was talking to. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. She told me it was her cousin. She said he'd been having a rough time and needed to vent. She said sometimes people sound alike, especially over the phone. She said all of this casually, like she was explaining a late bill or a missed call. I shook my head. I told her that wasn't possible. I told her that voice belonged to someone who was gone. She didn't look confused. She didn't look guilty. She looked thoughtful, like she was deciding how much to share. She picked up her drink and took a slow sip before setting it down again. Her hand didn't shake, not even a little. She told me she had a knack for voices. She said she'd always been good at picking them up. Accents, tones, patterns. She said some voices stick more than others. She told me she worked in elder care for a while. She said she'd sit with people for hours, listening to them talk about their lives, about people they missed. She said voices carry weight. She said they linger. My stomach turned. I asked how she knew about my brother. I knew I hadn't told her. I was careful about that. I barely had his photos up anywhere. She reminded me of my profile. She said she'd done a little digging. She said it wasn't hard to find obituaries if you know where to look. She said families leave trails even when they think they don't. That didn't explain the nickname. That didn't explain the exact sound. I asked her again, more firmly this time. She sighed and leaned back in the booth. The vinyl creaked under her weight. She told me she'd driven past the house I used to live in. She told me she'd sat outside it once, just to see it. She told me she'd watched me through the window one night when I was packing boxes after the funeral. That made my blood run cold. She said she heard me talking to myself. She said I repeated the nickname over and over while folding shirts. She said I sounded younger when I said it, softer. I felt sick. She said she practiced it after that, quietly, alone. She said she wanted to get it right. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the girl across from me with the things she was saying. The diner lights buzzed overhead. Someone dropped a plate in the kitchen. Life kept going like this was normal. She told me she answered the call on purpose. She said she thought it would be comforting. She said she wanted to see if I'd recognize it. I stood up so fast the table rattled. My legs felt unsteady, but I didn't sit back down. I grabbed my jacket and backed away from the booth like she might reach out and grab me. She didn't move. She just watched me, head tilted, eyes calm. I left cash on the table without counting. I don't know how much it was. I didn't care. I walked out into the cold air and didn't stop until I was in my car with the doors locked. I sat there shaking, my breath coming in short bursts. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and tried to ground myself. The world felt thin, like it could tear if I pushed too hard. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A missed call. No name. No number. I didn't check the voicemail. I drove home and slept with the lights on. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating on our nightstand. I didn't answer it. I just watched it shake itself toward the edge until it stopped. I still don't answer unknown numbers. I almost didn't go because my phone was at 5% and my hair looked like I lost a fight with a hoodie. That's usually how my bad ideas start, with me deciding to not care that much. I told myself it was just coffee at a mall cafe, nothing deep, nothing risky. Worst case, I waste an hour and get a funny story. I was wrong about the funny part. I met him inside one of those indoor malls that feels stuck in another decade. Dim skylights, fake plants, the echo of footsteps bouncing off tile. The cafe sat in the middle like an island, surrounded by people walking laps with shopping bags they didn't really need. I remember thinking it felt safe because there were so many people around, like nothing weird could happen in a place that public. He waved before I even saw him properly, like he already knew exactly where I'd come from. Not creepy yet, just confident. We ordered drinks and sat at one of the small round tables with the metal legs that wobble no matter how you sit. That's when the phone thing started. He asked if he could take a photo. I assumed he meant a quick one, like a casual memory thing. I shrugged and said sure, in that way people do when they don't want to seem uptight. He pulled his phone out fast, like he'd been waiting for permission, and snapped one right away. Then another. Then he leaned back and took one from farther away, angling the phone low like he was trying to get the background too. I laughed it off at first. People are weird about social media. I figured he was one of those guys who documents everything. I tried to focus on my drink, the ice clinking, the fake vanilla smell in the air. I talked about school, about how I hate morning classes, about how the mall always makes me sleepy. Every few minutes his phone came back up. Sometimes he didn't even ask, just a quick lift, a tap, then back down. He took photos of me stirring my drink, me looking away, me mid-blink. I started feeling like I was on display, like one of those screens at the phone store that loop ads all day. I told him to chill with it, half joking, half not. He smiled and nodded but didn't really stop. He said he liked capturing moments. He said people forget what things really look like. That line stuck with me, but I didn't know why yet. We walked around after finishing our drinks. He insisted on it, said the lighting was better near the big windows. The mall music followed us, tinny and distant. I noticed he always walked half a step behind me, which made it easier for him to take photos without getting in my way. I hated how aware I became of my posture, my hands, my face. I felt I was constantly being watched even when his phone was down. He took photos near the shoe store, near the fountain with the fake coins glued to the bottom, near a closed arcade with dark screens reflecting us back. Every time the phone came up, my stomach tightened a little more. I tried to change the vibe by sitting on a bench and talking more seriously. I asked him how long he'd been on the app. He answered, but his eyes kept drifting to the screen like it was calling him. He took another photo, closer this time. I could see my reflection in his phone glass, stretched and warped. Something felt off, but I couldn't name it yet. Not enough to leave. Just enough to make me alert. We stopped at a small bookstore near the food court. It was quiet inside, carpeted, the kind of place that smells like paper and dust. I felt calmer there. He took fewer photos, maybe because it felt wrong to do it in silence. I picked up a random book and flipped through it, pretending to my reading just to give my hand something to do. That's when his phone buzzed. He frowned at it, then turned the screen toward himself, tapping fast. I caught a glimpse of a photo grid before he tilted it away. My face flashed across the screen, then another version of my face, then another. Different angles, different clothes. I told myself it was just from today. Of course it was. He'd been taking photos nonstop. But the feeling didn't go away. We left the store and sat near the exit where the air was cooler. He finally put the phone down on the table between us. Face up. That was his mistake. The screen lit up with a notification preview, and behind it I saw the photo app still open. Not just today's photos. Rows and rows of them. And I was in all of them. I leaned in without thinking. My brain was already sprinting ahead of my body. The thumbnails weren't the same outfit, not the same hair, not the same locations. One looked like a bus stop. One looked like a school hallway. One looked like a park bench I recognized but couldn't place yet. My chest felt tight, like someone pressed pause on my breathing. I asked to see his phone. My voice sounded normal somehow, which scared me more. He hesitated for just a second, then slid it toward me like he'd already decided how this would go. I scrolled. The first thing I noticed was the dates. Not today. Not last week. Years. Some were dated before I even had the haircut in the earliest ones. Some were from winters I remembered because of what grade I was in, because of what jacket I wore every day. My face got younger as I scrolled down. Braces in one, bad bangs in another, a hoodie I only wore in middle school. My hands started shaking so hard I had to set the phone down on the table to keep from dropping it. These weren't pose photos. They weren't selfies. They were taken from across spaces, through crowds, from behind things. Some were blurry like he'd moved too fast. Some were too clear, like he'd been close for longer than I was comfortable imagining. I saw one from a grocery store aisle, one from a sidewalk near my old bus stop, one from a school event where I remembered feeling watched but told myself I was being dramatic. The mall noise faded into this dull roar in my ears. People walked past us laughing, talking, carrying food trays, and none of them had any idea my entire timeline was sitting on that table. I scrolled further. There were folders, organized, by year, by location. One folder had the name of my old street, the one I used to live on before we moved. Another had the name of a park near my aunt's place. Another just said mall. This mall. I looked up at him. His face wasn't nervous. It wasn't angry. It was calm in a way that made my skin crawl, like this was all going according to plan. I asked how long he'd been doing this. I don't even remember deciding to ask. The words just came up. He leaned back and folded his arms like he was settling in. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He explained it like it was a hobby, like bird watching or collecting cards. He said he noticed me years ago and thought I had a familiar face. He said he kept seeing me in different places and thought it was interesting. He said he liked patterns. He said he never lost track of me. I scrolled again and slower this time, forcing myself to really see them. There was one taken outside my old school. One from a coffee place I used to go to with my friends after class. One from a summer fair where I remembered feeling weird and leaving early. I realized something then that made my stomach drop even more. Some of the photos were taken from inside places. Angles that meant he had been sitting near me, standing close enough to hear me talk, to see what I ordered, to know my routines. I asked why he finally talked to me now. He told me he wanted to see if I'd recognize him. I didn't. That's the worst part. He said he'd been in the background so many times he thought maybe I'd start to notice. He said the app just made it easier. He said it felt right to finally take photos where I knew about it. Like that was a gift. I pushed the phone back toward him like it burned. My legs felt weak, but I stood up anyway. I didn't care how it looked. I didn't care if people stared. He stayed seated. He didn't grab me. He didn't block me. He just watched me like he was taking another picture with his eyes. I walked fast toward the exit. The automatic doors slid open and the outside air hit me like a wall. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My reflection in the window looked wrong, like I was slightly delayed for myself. I sat there for a long time before driving. My phone buzzed once with a notification from the app, a message preview I didn't open. When I finally got home, I went through my own camera roll. I scrolled back years, checking backgrounds, checking reflections, checking corners. I found nothing. But that almost made it worse, because it meant he was careful. I thought it was gonna be the chill kind of bad date, like awkward silences and me pretending I care about someone's playlist. I met her outside this tiny late-open noodle place wedged between a tire shop and a pawn store. The sign buzzed like it was tired. The air smelled like rain that never fully hits the ground. She was already there, leaning on the wall, scrolling. She looked like she belonged in the crowd, like the type who never walks alone. We got a booth near the window. The place was loud. She kept nodding like she was listening, but her eyes kept doing this quick little scan around the room, like she was mapping it. I noticed it because I do that too sometimes, like automatically, but hers felt sharper, like she was counting. Then she started asking about where I grew up. At first it was basic. What town, what street, how far from the city? I told her. I didn't think much of it because people ask that all the time, and I'm not exactly mysterious. But she didn't leave it there. She kept going, stacking questions like she was building something. What color was the house? What kind of fence? Did the front door open into a hallway or right into the living room? And yeah, that's not normal first date talk. I laughed a little, tried to make it a joke, said she was basically doing a quiz on me. She didn't laugh back. She just kept looking at me like she already knew the answers and wanted to see if I'd match. I answered because I'm a people pleaser and also because, weirdly, it felt good to talk about that place. I haven't gone back in years. I don't even like thinking about it most days. Not because it was bad, but because everything ended there in a way my brain still refuses to fully hold. My family vanished when I was younger. It's that simple and that impossible. One day they were there, the next day they weren't, and the world turned into cops and flyers and casseroles from neighbors and adults whispering in corners. I wasn't in the house when it happened. I was at a friend's place, and then suddenly I was basically not a kid anymore. I got moved around, relatives, foster stuff, all that. The house got locked up like a mouth that wouldn't talk. So when she kept poking at the layout of my childhood home like it was a fun topic, I got this tight feeling in my throat. Not a dramatic movie thing. More like my body was trying to warn me without making a scene. She asked about the stairs. I told her there were 2 sets. One by the front hall that went up, and a small one near the kitchen that went down. I said it like it didn't matter. But as soon as I said it, her face did this little change, like her brain checked a box. She asked what was at the bottom. I told her the basement door opened into a narrow space with shelves on the right and the old freezer on the left. She asked if the freezer was still there when we left. I said I didn't know because I never went back in after everything. I told her I only went once with my uncle to grab some clothes and it felt like walking through a museum that was still warm. I didn't mention the part where I kept thinking I'd hear my mom calling my name from upstairs, like she was just making dinner and the whole missing thing was a mistake. She asked about the kitchen window. I told her it faced the backyard and the neighbor's shed. I told her there was a crack in the corner of the glass that my brother did with a soccer ball. I told her about the ugly curtain my mom loved for some reason, the one with tiny fruit prints. She nodded like I was confirming her memory. I stopped eating. I looked at her hands. Her nails were bitten down. There was dried paint near one finger, like she'd been doing crafts or fixing something. Normal detail, except my brain was suddenly doing this thing where every small detail felt like a clue. I finally asked how she even knew what to ask, not in a cute teasing way, more like I couldn't keep it in anymore. She didn't act surprised. She didn't even look annoyed. She just leaned back and her eyes drifted to the window like she was watching something outside that I couldn't see. She reminded me she'd been in that house. She said she used to live there after my family disappeared. No smile, No dramatic pause, just like she was telling me she once rented a room somewhere. My whole body went cold. I stared at her and I could hear my own breathing way too loud over the restaurant noise. I tried to make sense of it fast, like maybe she meant the neighborhood. Maybe she meant a friend's house that looked similar. Maybe it was some messed up joke. But the way she said it, it didn't let me escape. It was too direct. She kept going, not using that soft, careful voice people use when they talk about missing people. She talked like she was listing rooms. She explained how the boards over the windows got pulled off. She talked about how easy the back door was to force because the frame was already warped from old water damage. She talked about the small patch of ceiling in the living room that was stained from a leak that never got fixed. And I knew every one of those details was real. I couldn't move. I couldn't even do the normal thing where you pretend you're fine so you can leave politely. My brain was stuck on one word she used without thinking. After. After my family disappeared. Like it was an event, and then the house became available. I asked her why. Not why she knew it, but why she was telling me now. She looked at me again, and her eyes weren't flirty or shy. They were flat, like she was looking through a screen. She said she wanted to see if I remembered it right. She said there was a spot that still felt the same even after everything else got stripped. My stomach turned. I knew there wasn't supposed to be another door. My dad would have noticed. He was the kind of person who knew where every screw and hinge was. But the way she described it, I could almost see it. The basement wall with the shelves. The corner where the shadows always sat. A section that maybe wasn't a section, maybe it was something else pretending. She told me she found it by accident. She said it was behind the shelving unit, and the unit was bolted in like someone didn't want it moved. She said she had to slide her fingers behind it and pull until the wood groaned. She said the air coming out felt old. She told me there was a narrow space behind the wall, like a crawl area but taller. She said there were marks on the studs, like scratches, not from tools. She said there were strips of cloth caught on nails. She said she found a child's shoe back there, turned sideways like it had been dropped in a rush. I felt like I was going to throw up right there into the bowl. My mind jumped to my brother's shoes, the ones with the worn toe because he dragged his feet. I hadn't thought about that in so long, and suddenly it was right in my face. She didn't stop. She talked about a deeper part of the space, where the dirt floor turned into concrete. She talked about a smell that didn't match the basement, something sweet and wrong. She said there were handprints on the concrete, faded like they'd been washed but not fully erased. She said she stayed back there sometimes when she heard people in the house. She said she listened to footsteps upstairs and learned the patterns. She learned which steps meant a man, which steps meant more than one person. She learned how long it took someone to cross the kitchen, how long it took them to open the fridge, how long it took them to notice the basement door wasn't locked the way it should be. She said she got good at being quiet. And that's when it hit me that she didn't just know the layout. She knew the timing. She knew the habits. She knew the place like she was studying it, like she was training in it. She said she only told me because she saw my name on the app and thought it was funny. She said she wondered if I'd grown into the house or grown away from it. She said she wondered if I ever dreamed about the basement door. I hadn't. Not the door. I dreamed about the house all the time, but it was always the front hall, always the living room, always the upstairs landing. Never the basement wall. Never something hidden. And now I couldn't stop picturing it. She started describing my bedroom, and that's what broke me. She said it was smaller than she expected. She said the window stuck sometimes. She said there were pencil marks on the wall near the doorframe where someone had measured heights. Those marks were ours. My mom used to line us up every year and draw little lines and dates. I pushed back from the table so hard the bench squealed. Heads turned. I didn't care. I grabbed my jacket and my phone. I left cash on the table without counting. I didn't look at her again because I was scared if I did I'd freeze. I walked out into the wet air and just kept going, fast, down the sidewalk, past the pawn store, past the tire shop, past a bus stop with flickering ads. I sat in the driver's seat and stared straight ahead. In my rearview mirror, I could see the street behind me, and for a second I thought I saw her across the road, just standing there, not chasing, not waving, just watching like she was checking if I'd do what she predicted. I drove without knowing where I was going. I just needed distance. Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the basement wall. I pulled up the old listing photos of the house that were still online, the ones taken when the bank tried to sell it years ago. I zoomed in on every corner I could see. I stared at the shelves. I stared at the stains. I stared at the place where a door might hide if he didn't want anyone to see it. And I realized something that made my stomach twist all over again. The shelves in the basement photos were the same shelves we had. Someone had replaced them. I knew something was wrong with that place the moment I realized I couldn't remember how long I'd been sitting there. Not in a dramatic way, not like time stopped, just this dull confusion where minutes and hours felt like the same thing. I remember checking my phone and feeling annoyed at myself for checking again, like I'd already done that recently, except I couldn't remember doing it. The restaurant was one of those spots that looked fake cozy. Warm lights, fake plants, music just loud enough to stop you from hearing other tables clearly. It was attached to a hotel I'd never noticed before, even though it was right off a street I drove all the time. The windows were tall and dark, reflecting more inside than outside, which made it feel like we were boxed in. He was already there when I arrived, sitting straight, hands folded, smiling politely. Normal guy, normal clothes. Nothing that screamed danger. That's probably why I stayed. The date itself wasn't bad. That's the part I keep getting stuck on. We talked about random stuff. Jobs, shows, places we've been. He laughed when he was supposed to. He asked questions back. If someone asked me to describe him later, I'd struggle. There was nothing distinct enough to grab onto. The food was fine. Not great, not terrible. I ate most of it without really thinking. The server came by a few times, always the same one. Tall, quiet, tired eyes. She looked at me a little longer than necessary every time, like she was waiting for me to say something. I thought maybe she recognized me, like I'd been there before and forgot. That happens sometimes. As the night went on, I noticed small things that didn't sit right. The music looped too cleanly. The same song played twice in a row without anyone reacting. The table next to us never changed. Same couple. Same drinks. Same posture. It felt that pause screen you forget is pause until you notice nobody moves. I told myself I was overthinking. I always do that on dates. Anxiety brain looking for exits. Eventually, the plates were cleared. My drink was empty. His was too. There was that awkward end of date pause where you both wait for the other person to suggest the next step. That's when the server came back. She didn't ask if we wanted dessert. She didn't bring the check right away. She leaned in slightly closer to me than him, like she was sharing a secret she'd shared before. She asked me if I wanted the usual ending or if I wanted to try surviving this time. Not joking, not playful, quiet and serious, like she was offering two sides. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like I missed a step. I stared at her, trying to process what she just said. My brain reached for explanations, dark humor, weird staff banter. Maybe she meant emotionally surviving bad dates. Maybe it was some dumb-themed restaurant thing. But the word this time hit me hard. I asked her what she meant. She glanced at him, then back at me. Her expression didn't change. She said some people preferred familiarity. She said others got tired of repeating the same night. Repeating. I looked at him. He was watching me closely now. Not confused. Not surprised. Waiting. I told the server I didn't understand. She nodded like she expected that. She said most people didn't at first. She said that was usually how it went. I asked what the usual ending was. She didn't answer directly. She said it was quick. She said it was clean. She said people rarely remembered it anyway. My heart started pounding. I felt heat rush to my face, then drain away. My hands were cold. I tucked them under the table so she wouldn't see them shaking. I asked what surviving meant. That made her pause. She said surviving took longer. She said it was messier. She said people who chose it usually didn't come back. Come back where? I realized then that nobody else in the restaurant was paying attention. The couple next to us still hadn't moved. The music hummed softly. The lights didn't flicker. Everything felt frozen in place around this one moment. I asked her how many times I'd been there before. She hesitated, then said enough that she stopped counting. That broke something in me. I told her she had the wrong person. I told her I'd never been there. I told her this was my first date with him, my first time in that place. She looked genuinely sorry for me. She said that was what I always said. I turned to him, my heart racing, and asked him what was going on. He finally spoke, calm and gentle. He said he was proud of me for making it this far without panicking. He said last time I didn't even finish my drink. Last time. My chest tightened. I felt dizzy, but the room tilted slightly to the left. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. I asked him what happened to me last time. He didn't answer. He just looked at the server. She sighed softly and said she wasn't supposed to spoil the ending. She said that was part of the choice. I looked back and forth between them, my brain screaming at my body to move, to stand up, to run. But my legs felt heavy, like they didn't fully belong to me. I asked the server if anyone ever chose to survive. She nodded. She said a few did. She said most of them looked like me right now. Confused, angry, scared. I asked what happened to them. She said they left. She said they remembered enough to stay away. That word stuck. Enough. I asked if she was helping me. She said helping was a strong word. She said she was offering an option. She said nobody ever offered her one. That made my throat tighten. I looked at the exit. It was right there, close enough to reach in seconds if my body would just cooperate. I asked her what would happen if I didn't choose. She said the usual ending would happen anyway. My heart slammed against my ribs. I asked how much time I had. She glanced at the clock behind the bar. She said not much. I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness, but from sheer overload. My head hurt. My thoughts felt scrambled. I tried to remember other dates I'd been on. Other nights, they blurred together in my mind like smeared paint. I realized I couldn't clearly remember how I'd met him online. I couldn't remember the exact message that started it. I couldn't even remember deciding to come here. That scared me more than anything. I took a deep breath and told the server I wanted to survive. She held my gaze for a long second and nodded once. She said that was new. She slid the check onto the table, but not in front of me, in front of him. She told him it was time. His smile faded for the first time that night. I stood up so fast my chair tipped back and fell over. A sound echoed too loudly in the quiet room. Nobody reacted. I grabbed my bag and stepped away from the table. The server pointed toward a side door I hadn't noticed before, tucked between two plants. She told me not to look back and not to stop until I was outside. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I ran. The side door led to a hallway, then a stairwell, then out into cold night air that felt unreal against my skin. I kept moving until my lungs burned and my legs ached. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I locked the doors and sat there shaking, staring straight ahead. The restaurant looked normal from the outside. Lights on. People inside. Nothing strange. My phone buzzed. A notification from the app. It said I had a new match. His face. Same smile. Same bio. I deleted the app. I turned my phone off. I drove home the long way. Sometimes I still feel like I skipped something important, like I walked out before the story finished. But I'm here. I'm breathing. I remember choosing to run. That has to count for something. I knew the night was wrong when the building doors closed behind us and the sound felt too final. Not dramatic, not loud, just heavy, like the air sealed itself in. I remember thinking I should have stayed on the sidewalk a second longer, checked my phone, pretended I forgot something. Instead, I stepped forward and told myself I was being paranoid again. The place wasn't a restaurant this time. It was a rooftop lounge on top of an old office building downtown. Exposed concrete, low lights, music that echoed like it was trapped in the walls. He picked it because it was quiet and not crowded. I agreed because quiet sounded nice for once. We met in the lobby. He waved like we were already mid-conversation, like I was late even though I wasn't. Normal guy. Normal jacket. Normal smile. Nothing that should have made my pulse pick up the way it did. The elevator was already waiting, doors opened like it had been called ahead of time. We stepped in together. The doors slid shut smoothly, too smoothly. There were buttons for floors 1 through 20. The rooftop was listed as 20. He pressed it. The button lit up. The elevator didn't move. We stood there for a second, the hum of the building filling the space. Then it started going up, slow and steady. I leaned back against the wall, watching the numbers tick by. 5, 6, 7. He asked me how my day had been. I answered. Normal conversation. Nothing weird. I started to relax. Then the elevator skipped. The display jumped from 7 to 9 without passing 8. I frowned, but didn't say anything. Elevators glitch sometimes. Old buildings do that. We kept going. 10, 11. Then it skipped again. From 11 to 13. My stomach tightened. He didn't react, didn't even glance at the display. He kept talking like nothing had happened, telling a story about work that I couldn't focus on. My attention was locked on the numbers. 14, 15. Then the elevator stopped. Hard. Not a gentle pause. A sudden jolt that made my knees bend slightly. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The display read 16. The doors didn't open. The music cut out completely. The silence was thick. I could hear my own breathing way too clearly. I asked him if this was normal. He smiled and said it sometimes took a minute. The elevator started moving again. 16 jumped straight to 18. My heart started pounding. I grabbed the rail without thinking. I asked him what floor the lounge was actually on. He said 20. I asked why we skipped 8. He tilted his head like he hadn't noticed. He said some floors were maintenance only. That didn't make sense. There was no sign. No note, just missing numbers. The elevator slowed again. The display flickered. For half a second, it didn't show a number. It showed a word. Again. My chest tightened. The display went back to 18 like nothing happened. I stared at it, my brain scrambling. I asked him if he saw that. He looked at the display, then back at me. He said he didn't see anything wrong. The elevator resumed its climb. 19. Then it stopped again. This time the doors opened. But there was no floor. On the other side was darkness. Not a hallway. Not stairs. Just black, like the inside of a closed room with no lights. The air beyond the doors felt colder, heavier. I didn't move. He stepped forward like he expected me to follow. I asked where we were. He said almost there. The display above the door still read 19. I looked down. There was no threshold. No visible floor beyond the elevator. Just dark. I told him I wasn't stepping out. He sighed softly, like I was being difficult. He said we didn't have much time before a reset. Reset what? The display flickered again. This time it showed my name. My full name. I felt dizzy. My hands started shaking. I backed up against the wall, my heart racing. I told him to close the doors. He didn't press anything. He just watched me with that calm, patient expression I was starting to hate. He said last time I froze too. That phrase hit me like a punch. I asked what he meant by last time. He glanced at the open doorway, then back at me. He said last time I waited too long and it made things messy. He said this time he was trying to be gentle. The darkness beyond the elevator shifted, not moving exactly, but changing depth, like it wasn't flat, like it went somewhere. I felt tears sting my eyes, panic rising fast. I asked him why the elevator skipped floors. He said because not every step needed to be remembered. The display changed again. It showed 18, then 17. It was counting down. I asked what happened if it reached one. He smiled faintly and said we wouldn't get another ride. My heart slammed against my ribs. I lunged forward and hit the close door button. Nothing happened. The doors stayed open. The display ticked down. 16. 15. I hit the emergency button. The speaker crackled, then went silent. He told me to stop wasting time. I looked past him at the darkness. I felt like it was watching, waiting for a choice I didn't understand. 14. 13. I told him I was leaving. He nodded and said that was an option. 12. I asked if he was coming with me. He shook his head. He said he already had. 11. Something about the way he said that made my stomach twist. I looked at the darkness again, then at the display. 10. I realized the elevator wasn't taking us up. It was taking us back. Back to something we'd already done. I shoved past him and ran out of the elevator. My foot hit solid ground immediately. Bright lights. A hallway. Carpeted floor. I stumbled forward, gasping, my heart racing. I turned around. The elevator doors were closing. Inside, he stood calmly, hands folded, watching me. The display above the doors read 20. The doors shut. The elevator started moving. down. I stood there shaking, trying to understand where I was. The hallway looked like a normal office floor. Empty. Quiet. I found the stairwell and ran down, not stopping until I hit the lobby. The doors to the street were right there. I burst outside into the night air, breathing hard, my hands shaking. I checked my phone. I had a missed notification from the app. It said my ride was on the way up. I deleted the app right there on the sidewalk. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I went back during the day. The building had 19 floors. No rooftop. No lounge. The directory skipped from 18 to 20. Maintenance only. Sometimes when I'm in elevators now, I count every number. If one goes missing, I get out immediately.